Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and you are listening to the most definitive podcast on the Tartaria conspiracy, on the interwoven mud flood conspiracy. Tartaria and mud flood, two of the most mind-shocking, the most triggering conspiracies that just don't seem to be going away. They are gaining steam because, of course, the architecture the world over seems to unnaturally match. And not just that, none of the historical narratives regarding how any of this architecture was constructed with horse and buggy. It's just very, very perplexing. The World Fairs, also the subject of much speculation. I mean, there's just so much here. Very, very difficult to make heads or tails of any of this stuff. Was there technology of antiquity? I mean, we're going to be examining everything in typical MINDSHOCK fashion, with logic and reason at the forefront, in an attempt to definitively weave the narratives together in a single podcast where the structure can encompass all of what these conspiracies entail and touch upon, because there's so much here. Obviously, the victors write the history books. For whatever reason, the coincidence theorists, the authority worshipping cultist bootlicker goofs, they just can't grasp the concept that the victors write the history books. And the victors don't want to look bad. And of course, the victors, the corrupt profiteers, the string pullers, the social engineers, the powers that be, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them. If their goal is to control the population, why would they reveal the truth about any of this stuff? Why would they do that? As always, if you find the MINDSHOCK podcast interesting, informative, entertaining, you can donate to our PayPal, help support the channel. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast, or requests. You can also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. Or if you are here live with us in the live chat, I will attempt to get to everyone's comments and or questions. So before we begin, I mean, does anybody have any questions before we get started on this deep dive? I have compiled quite a few different clips, podcasts, documentaries that touch upon all of this mystery. Some of them have nothing to do with the Tartaria or mud flood. They're just to illustrate the architectural marvels that seem to be at odds chronologically with the technology the so-called official narrative has claimed existed. So if nobody has any specific questions on the general theory itself, we will just jump right in. Exhibit A here will be none other than Whisperjack's questioning early America. If you haven't checked out Whisperjack's channel, it's quite interesting. A lot of interesting information.
The old stone walls, the uninhabited castles, the craggy ruins bound together by ivy. Such grandeur in the old world, such depth, such history. Alas, I...
The other thing that's kind of strange about a lot of these old photographs are how ancient and so-called modern coexist together. It's almost like there were many, many resets, not just one. If you haven't checked out the entire Altered History podcast series on MINDSHOCK, you can check that out. I go more in depth on that one. But this is an attempt to make a definitive edition of this theory as a whole.
Being from the United States, I'm told that this is the new world, lacking the complex, ancient, scarred and tortured from year after year of conflict, conquered and reconquered. Many Americans travel far to set their eyes on with storied, rich, cultural landmarks like Turkey, Spain, Serbia, Romania, Scotland, Portugal, Hungary, the Czech Republic, with buildings and layouts that boggle the mind, their construction a complete mystery, the craftsmanship unparalleled, and we are told we have nothing on this scale in the New World. Nothing from these time periods. For everything in America is new, built in a flurry of activity, due to labor from the hardiest men the world has ever seen. A new world, a new way. But then one day, you wake up and discover you're looking at a princess castle in New York City. And the year's 1890, and you wonder, what's this? Could this be a special custom commission for some well-traveled New York resident with loads of cash? Someone who wanted to bring a bit of their travels home, paid exorbitant fees to have such a building constructed here in New York, and
Whisperjack's really funny.
such an early period? Perhaps. But then what's this? Another castle? Of amazing proportions. Built when? In the 1800s? With mules, donkeys, with a few hundred men who arrived by stagecoach?
I mean, the narrative is so ludicrous when you take a step back that all of this could be constructed that easily, that quickly, with the transport of all these materials without any kind of real cranes. I mean, I'm sure they had some kind of rudimentary cranes, but the kind of cranes required at this height, I mean, it's absolutely astonishing.
How could this be? And you're told, no, this is not a castle. This is a temple. Yes. You're in Utah, boy. There are no castles here. But, do my eyes betray me? How is this possible? And this, in Detroit, another one. In Detroit, and the year 1890? How can this be? Why on earth, how would Detroit have this? In such an early stage, Detroit is an industrial wasteland. And this is a castle. No, you fool. This is simply a bicycle store. Go.
It is kind of weird how the storefronts at the bottom, it's like they were just installed into the pre-existing building. It's almost as if maybe if the inhabitants were just placed there, maybe the original the so-called original not the original inhabitants, the original inheritors of these buildings didn't really know what they were for either, and they just put in their little shops.
Go big or go home. That's how Detroit rolls. Curiouser and curiouser. And the show goes on, place after place. New Jersey, Boston, Chicago, Buffalo, Richmond, Memphis, and on, and on, and on, and on, and on. And then you're faced with reality. Indeed, it would seem impossible to build something like this in 1890, even if the desire was there. How could it be constructed with the tools at their disposal, which at this point is a rather paltry list? Things like the paper towel, toilet paper, and the paper clip, and the clothespin, and the rotary hand drill, jeans, zippers, and bottle caps were being invented for the first time, we're told. We don't have power tools, and we won't for some time, and this can be evidenced by these babies. So, let me understand something. These are the modern means of transportation. These are the roads. And this is the post office. Am I understanding this correctly? Yes, this is what we are expected to believe about America, that this is merely the post office in the year 1900 in Chicago. They apparently take mail very seriously. But really it boggles the mind. How did the material even get here? How is it even constructed, and why? What is the purpose of having such an amazing post office
with an antenna on the top?
When you rule out the impossible, what's left, no matter how unlikely or ridiculous we have to go with? It's impossible for us to have built this. Therefore, we did not construct this.
Well, let's not appeal to incredulity. If they obviously extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If the evidence isn't there, then there's no reason to believe that this was constructed as reported by the so-called official narrative, by the powers that be, by the corrupt profiteers, by the victors of history that wrote the books, which are obviously the victors would not be revealing the real truth. So, I mean, the amount of theories left over are quite a bit. The foundation, found nation. Yeah, these founded cities are founded. Founded. I mean, it's kind of weird. The nomenclature is kind of weird. You found a city. This city was founded. And the other thing that's kind of curious: how come no new cities are founded or created? I mean, when was the last time a new major city just popped up out of nowhere? I mean, the amount of technology that's existed in the past 100 years, they could easily make a brand new city. And yet, they don't. Why?
Not with those tools. Not in that era. Demonstrably impossible. In the year 1900, even to have the budget and the ability and the desire and the necessity to create something so ridiculously huge is impossible. These mansions in New York, same story. Impossible.
And that's another thing, too. What would necessitate the building of such structures, especially with such low population numbers? I mean, the population numbers were low. These people were just trying to survive. Like, what would necessitate the building of these gigantic structures? The amount of time, money, and effort for what?
Even here, fast forwarding 70 years, in 1960, this is a ridiculous building. Though others may have come later that seem taller, they are much less remarkable, much less ornate. These are adorned with angels and Torahs, wreaths of eternity. It's unfathomable to think that early Americans needed this just simply for a federal courthouse, as it later became. Library of Congress, the year is 1900. And I'm to believe that we built this to be a library. Well, then what happened to us? Either I'm expected to believe that we were capable of this and now we're not. Maybe. But more likely is we didn't build this at all. A post office in New York. Very similar. Why? How? Why didn't we do it again? And so it goes. All across the country. You see this. We're told these aren't castles. These aren't monasteries or temples. These are post offices. These are stock exchanges. These are music academies. These are bus stations. And I don't believe it. The ruins in Europe that look like this will last thousands of years. We tear these down. Why? Are we creating something better? Have we got a new trick up our sleeve? We're going to outdo these old things? I don't think so. I don't think we can. I think the idea is to eventually hide this history. Hide as much of it as you can. Like, this is destroyed. This is in New Jersey. Was in New Jersey. Destroyed. Ah, yes, a very believable monument for Civil War soldiers in Maryland.
Yeah, some of these are interesting points as well, even with the World Fairs. Like, why just the choices in the monuments? They mirror, I mean, a lot of them seem to mirror more, I guess you could use the word ancient, although who knows how old they really were. But, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of clues in the statues and monuments. They don't really seem of the time period.
The crappy little font hacked into the base of this Atlantic City, of course. These somatic sound wave patterns are not suspicious, nor is the front yard full of sculptures. This is just an everyday scene in Atlantic City in 1904. This is not a castle. No, you're a fool to believe so. No, this is an armory in Boston. We don't have castles. We have armories. We don't know how to build castles. Oh, well, of course we built a basement. Surely if you were making an incredibly complex building of stone block and gigantic proportions, well, surely you would dig a basement and then put windows in it, floor level. Because in case it rains or floods or anything, you want to make sure that you compromise the integrity of the structure as soon as possible. Not just one basement, not just one building. All buildings must be compromised in such a way. We didn't build these, but somebody did. And why don't we know who that somebody is? It wasn't these clowns. Do you see the contrast? Do you see the current capabilities in other technological departments versus the technical skill and ability that you would need to construct this? Much less the money, the necessity, must gather the function. Certainly this served up a function at some point, didn't it? You would think so. These antennas. This is not an Arc de Triomphe. This is a train station.
The other thing I kind of noticed, I haven't heard too many people talking about, in a lot of these photos, If these are that capable populations, why are they not continuing to build like this? Why is there nothing in the background here of them building another structure like this? If they're capable, why are there no half-built buildings like this in any of the backgrounds in any of these photos? That would be one of my major questions.
Everyone knows that. We don't have those here in America. Those wheels brought the material to make this. And if you believe this still, I think you need to reconsider. Now, I understand that that shatters everything. That will cause you to doubt everything. Well, if the shoe fits, I mean, I guess the choice to know the truth is yours. But personally, I find it odd that we've all been lied to. Who built these? I understand this is a bank now in Buffalo, but I can't imagine the possibility that this was constructed in the 1890s by these people. We'll get to you another time. Here's another bank that defies all logic. It looks like the majority of people don't even have...
Again, notice how in the background there are no other half-built buildings in this style. Again, if this local population is capable of this, because go around and look around today. Major city, small town. There's always construction going on somewhere. Sometimes, in some city, like just go around and take photos in all major cities. You'll see partially built buildings in the same architectural style as the buildings that surround them. Yet in all of these older photos, like there's nothing in the background half built in this kind of style with this kind of ability.
Cars. I don't even think cars were invented yet. This is like 1890. So we've regressed so hard. Or more likely, people came along later and chiseled their name into this, claimed it for their own. We are told, after all, that all the founding members of the country practiced Freemasonry. Perhaps that's a little bit different meaning than what we've been led to believe. What do you think? Think it seems reasonable to assume that these people built this? Put the eagle on everything and the phoenix. Speaking of phoenix, pure and healthy beverage. Yeah, the same people falling for this. You're gonna turn around and blow your mind. Build this, huh? It's not possible. This is a colorized version of that same bank, looking equally as ludicrous. What came first, the rail or the church? Or the castle, I mean. Churches don't need to be like this. You wouldn't build a church after you put this rail here. Not this close. It's ridiculous. This is old. Very old. As old as the ones in Europe. Makes you wonder if they're being lied to as well. After all, there are paintings in Europe with just like this. Little mules next to ridiculous castles. Oh, I'm sorry, post offices. Post offices. My bad, Sacramento. Post office. Yeah, no. This looks completely sunken in to the ground. In order to be symmetrical, which clearly these people knew about symmetry, this needs to go down at least another, I don't know, here, or the third, if this even makes sense. And then that would explain why these windows are so low, wouldn't it? It would appear that something happened here, some event, which drove people away, wiped them out, I don't know. And then we come along, and I don't say we, I guess Columbus or whoever, who knows what's true anymore. They come along and they move right in and set up shop, and well, this is the theater. Well, this here's the post office, and this here's the government library, and this is where I'm gonna sleep, and what about you guys? And now let's bring a bunch of immigrants here and tell we built all this. We're pretty incredible. Pump them all up with debt. And with patriotism, perfect slaves. Use them to do our dirty work. Anytime we need something done around the world to further our interests, we just pump them full of another story about someone from far away doing something horrible. We gotta go save them. It'll work for a while. One day they might catch on, but by then hopefully we'll destroy all the literature and all the books and all the references and they'll never know.
And he mentioned destroying the books. Destroying the books, like all these mass book burnings throughout history. I mean, even the burning of the Library of Alexandria, allegedly, if that happened. I mean, book burnings would be very convenient. I mean, and look at modern day book burning. Internet censoring, like the great purges of YouTube. Like, back in the day, you can find any documentary about any conspiracy on YouTube. All of that's been purged. The equivalent of book burning in the modern day.
Whew, they almost got away with it. This is the Church of Christ Scientist in Boston. Now, forgive me, but that's possibly the dumbest name for a religion I've ever heard. Christ Scientist? What does that even mean? As if Christ and scientists are bed buddies today. Right? Getting right along, huh? The believers of Christ are homies with the believers of scientists. They see eye to eye on everything, from what I understand. Now, if this were in Turkey or Pakistan, you'd call it a mosque. If it were in France, you'd probably remove this top piece and you'd call it a castle or a chateau. But this is America, so it's a church. Could be a Capitol building, but Capitol building was already taken. It's the best building. Starting to see the pattern? This is Indiana. Interesting. City Hall. And I would pay more attention to this, except for there's a Palace of Suites right here. Oh my god. Richmond, Virginia. Well, who knew? And look at them boys done fucked around and constructed. Which is it? Log cabins and adobe huts and stagecoaches? Or this? Because they can't exist at the same time. So which is the lie? Well, since these are here, I'm going to assume all the rest is a lie. Maybe that's why they say these cities are founded by, or the founders, or found dead. Most of these buildings, they don't claim they were constructed. They say they're designed, or designated perhaps, or erected. Maybe what they mean is resurrected. You see, the systems around us they're designed to mock us, to inform us of what's really going on without us picking up on it. It's maddening to watch in politics, insulting really. And this is a whole new level of it. I have studied history with a passion. I wanted to rebel against this and say, this is no way. No way all of that was a waste. It wasn't. It just was fiction, not history. This is in Connecticut, by the way. Exactly what I picture when I think of Connecticut. Here's another building in Baltimore, 1905. Looking very modern until you see this. And I don't even understand what's going on here. I thought that this would be the water, but then what is this down here? Like, what is this? Looks like subterranean levels and buildings down here. Is this why there's a city under every city? Tunnels under every city and capital, university. Is this why they claim they raised the street levels up in Chicago and Seattle and all these places, raised it up, leaving a subterranean floor? Is there
Not just the subterranean floor, but again, all of the countless tunnels under every major city. Another curiosity, then, I don't know if that's been adequately explained, and I mean, what percentage of the tunnels are even known about?
already always there? It's underneath. It's what the basements are. That seems far too clean of a flood. Like the first or second floor of like all these old buildings around the same time period. Seems like they're hiding something that was down there, covering something up they don't want us to have. I imagine it would benefit our lives if that's what they're trying to cover up. But the real amazing part is the ability, the size of the lie that they could get away with it, that they could pull off such a massive deception. It's really ingenious and it's terrifying. Because what else? What else is a lie? If everything we know about ourselves is a lie, who are we? What are we really capable of? Why are we here? And this gives a whole new meaning to everything. And I don't think that I can ever go back. You can't unsee it. You guys think this is normal for this building to exist? And I just don't know what to tell you. I guess keep on. If you don't think that this is some old technology, I don't know. This isn't suspicious to anybody, huh? In America, except the first. Now, where these people went,
I would say it's curious. Very, very curious.
I don't know, but they obviously disappeared sometime in the 1800s. Now this is Chicago. Anyone seen Chicago lately?
So this is supposedly all some kind of paper mache built for a world fair that was quickly destroyed. Definitely does not make a lot of sense.
Does it look like this? Does it look better than this? I don't think anything looks better than this. This, to me, looks like as most of a paradise kind of place that you could ever imagine. Normally, I feel like you go outside, you go to the shoreline, you go to see things of beauty like this. I feel like you could come here every day and just feel inspired and alive and great. And this is what a city should look like. Of course, they destroyed all this. They destroyed all this except for this building over here. I think they call it the Art Museum, and they claim that this is all that was made with cheap materials, made to be destroyed. You know, really, made to be destroyed, huh? Well, even if you made this cake frosting, it'd be an amazing feast. But that's just a lie. You didn't make this out of hemp and plaster. The hell out of here. This was the destruction of the old world in our faces. A reintroduction of specific technologies that they wanted to tell us about. A suppression of the ones they couldn't figure out how to make money off of. And everybody's dressed here to go to a funeral. Their own funeral. Funeral of an old world. And whether or not they knew it, I doubt they did. When hamburgers are 5 cents and you can buy a house for $5,000 and Chicago looks like this, why would you be suspicious about anything? I mean, actually, that's a good reason to be suspicious about everything, but clearly it wasn't really the way people thought, But something ain't right. We know that now. And really, look at this. This is the stuff they sold. Cigars, credit. Like Pleasure Island. It's like Pinocchio. Just, hey, come on in, boys. Take whatever you can. Fucking chill to every buffalo. Shit, you got some people on your land that live there already? Whatever. Drop a deed. Chase them out. Get some rifles. Get a lot of guys. Get them out of here. Those people living in the hills, been there for thousands of years. Fuck.
Also, deed, dead, deed. The deed to a house, dead, deed, dead, deed. Same word.
Manifest destiny. Give me $5 and you can have a piece of paper that says that land's yours. Go deal with it. What a racket. What a joke that they were roped into. And really, this is the end. This is how it works out. All those fires in the 1800s. This looks suspiciously like those Civil War photos have like stuff piled up like, see, what told you we're building this. You trying to act like this is you constructing this? Get the fuck out of here. Who builds like that? Crumb by crumb, scattering shit everywhere. No, this has been destroyed. They definitely didn't rebuild it. Not like that. This is Hotel Brunswick in Boston. Built by these little pilgrims down here. Come on, Mary, grab a shovel. We're going to build a hotel. We're going to make it lovely. We're going to make it so lovely, in 120 years, they'll look at it and be like, how'd they do that? And they'll scratch their butts, and they'll say, we can't even do that now. And lo and behold, here we are. As if these doorways aren't supposed to be taller. This is the hotel in Boston as well. Not a castle, you idiots. There are no castles here in America.
It does look pretty spectacular, I have to say. A lot of this old architecture does look pretty spectacular. Why isn't it being built now? I mean, those are the questions.
This is a hotel. Stupid. And what do we have here? Another 1905 hotel. Nobody here. Very, very believable that they would know how and they would need to make something like this. You know, like this. Now, what exactly is the point of this? What's missing? Surely you don't just build this little, like, housing on hundreds and hundreds of...
Perhaps a large bell is missing. If you haven't checked out the reptilian conspiracy on MINDSHOCK, check that out.
Buildings that serves no purpose. What's the point of the domes? The antennas? Wait a second. Earlier, we saw this in the Czech Republic. We were told this was a European ruin. How does one exist in Boston? That's impossible. Yeah, this architecture was just so that you could put a massive fucking cigar sign on the side of it. This is in Jacksonville, 1904. Wonder what those could be. Certainly could be some sort of antenna. Transmitter, could they? I mean, look at the telephone pole, okay, that we're putting up. Look at the difference between this rustic fucking... It still has knobs on it from the branches. It's not even... This is the telephone pole. But you're going to say that you built this behind it. The same people built that as built this rotten-ass telephone pole.
I mean, I think that's a false equivalency, but yeah, I mean, you know, what are you going to do?
It's literally just wood. Barely. And what a joke. Look at this amazing building. Looks like but we're to believe that this belongs to Keith. Keith's with this shitty-ass sign. And if this isn't a battery, like a lantern, I don't know what is. This is Lexington, Kentucky. It's clear the way they brought us here. What they're really trying to sell us on is this. Pump them full of this, and then they'll be too stupid to...
Wait, what does that say? Child's Brothers Drugs? The Child's Brothers Drugs. Child's Drugs? That's weird.
Realize. This is Ellis Island off the shoreline of New York. It's gone now. I'm not sure why. It's pretty incredible. This is New Jersey, and this is gone. I don't know what's missing from these. I don't know what it was originally. Even though it's very ornate, it looks somewhat gutted, and it's gone. Now why? Who would tear that down? In Europe, they last thousands of years, but we can't make them last a few hundred? What kind of world was this? You can bury your head in the sand on this if you want, but someday you're gonna have to face it. You've been lied to. Proof is everywhere you go. Any building built early 1900s or earlier, you're going to see it. The choice to know is yours, but this world is not what they tell us. Now here's this one. Well, where is it? Well, now you don't know, do you? Before you might have been like, that's clearly Europe. And yeah, it is. This is in the UK. I don't see much of a difference. How about this one? Well, this is Millard Fillmore's house. It's not a castle. Oh shit. Take that sign down. How about this one? This is what we're calling a train station. I'm guessing that all this dirt was pushed out of the way for this. Here's a proper castle with a moat. Look at that. A moat and a drawbridge and a castle. Now,
yeah, that's kind of curious. That is pretty curious. That is curious. Huh.
this is a castle. This is what I'm talking about. This is that old world stuff. This is that old world stuff. This is what I'm talking about. This is in Minneapolis. That's right. Minneapolis. The city hall. A castle with a moat. Or a city hall building with a basement. You run with whatever story fits your version of history, I guess. But then there's this. You know, the actual photographs of cities underneath cities. Underneath Indianapolis here, you have, Native American ruins? No. That's a mystery. You see, anytime you run into something that goes along with the narrative, it's history. Anytime you run into something that defies the narrative, it's a mystery. And there it shall remain. A mystery. I would argue.
History, mystery, story, a mystery, a myth story.
You that it's no longer a mystery if you discover it. I think it means that the history is wrong and the mystery is more accurate, since it's at least adaptable. But no, they're never going to teach anyone about this. Never. Why would they? MIT building, Montana, 1891. Nashville. Who would have thought? It looked like Gondor. This here's New Orleans. Yep, horse and buggy. And this totally checks out. You know, I would like to believe that the pioneers had magic powers, that they were content with little boxes on little wheels like this, but they were secretly, their superpower was in architecture, and they construct the most magnificent, amazing buildings in the whole world. They lasted forever, and they're highly complex and highly ornate, and we couldn't even copy them today if we tried. That was their superpower. And I'm talking about early New York. This photograph's from 1890, and if you think that could possibly be true, I'm afraid it's you that believe in crazy things. I'm of a much more sound mind, and I'm going to go ahead and say that that's impossible. There are no castles in America. This is a tabernacle. How dare you confuse that with a castle? You know, temple? That's a theater, clearly. What? That ain't no... Do you see the sheer ridiculous idea that this building can be made by the people who are riding in horse and buggy? Ludicrous. This is North Carolina. Just what I expected to see. This is Norway. Norway, huh? I would have thought by now that you were going to show me someplace in Minnesota. But there's no difference, is there? Only the stories were told. Maybe theirs is fake too. This ain't no damn castle.
Yeah, a lot of the architecture is just so similar. It's kind of hard to rectify there not being some kind of worldwide civilization.
Why, this here's a New York armory. We always build them like that. Is that so? Well, since you say, though, it must be. Since you know, the powers that be are so fond of telling us the truth. I mean, why would I doubt anything that the government said? Did you drop off the latest bricks? I sure did. Cool. We're just gonna build a little thing here. Thanks for your help. Just a little thing here.
I mean, absolutely extraordinary. And again, notice how in the background there are no half-built ones.
Just a little bit more. I'll put another thing on it. On the top. Dome, please. Yes, another dome. Okay, sweet. All right, now pole. Yeah. I think we'll be done. If you believe this story, if you think that we built these, man, you'll believe anything. This is in Ohio. This is an old asylum. We locked people in who were political dissidents. Basically, this is your home, Trump supporters. And the early Americans were fond of worshipping pagan gods, whom they spent much time constructing and erecting on the top of their very ornate and complex buildings, of which they are proud of and took great joy. This is them. This is their legacy. Behold the beauty, far beyond anything Rome ever could produce. And we're told it's an insurance building. The old state house, complete with the old statues of unicorns. You know, as befitting a normal, respectable establishment. Or how about this one? Of course there's amazing statues of topless women. This is New Orleans after all. I mean, are they making things like this today? No. We get boxes. Shit drywall boxes. And no one thinks this is interesting, huh? No one thinks that this is suspicious. Everyone still thinks that we are progressing, huh? Even after this stares them in the face. This is the Pabst building in Milwaukee. Pabst building in Milwaukee. Do you get it yet? This is Penn Station, New York, which they tore down for being too dirty. Tore this down. Have you seen New York? Do you think they're really concerned about buildings being dirty? Or do they realize how ridiculous this is? The existence of this it defies everything that they've ever told us about who we are. And they can't have that. The Academy of Fine Arts. Not fine font. No. Chisel font. Crappy. Unlike the rest of this amazing building, we outsourced the sign maker. Philadelphia is a shithole today. My, how far they've fallen. If this was once something that they just threw up in a few years.
I mean, it's just astounding. Like, how long would it actually take to build something like that? Not just, the main structure and foundation, but then all of the rooms inside, just touching everything up. I mean, it would take a long time.
Not possible. This is the legacy. This is what they brought. This is what they promised. This is what they gave us. They are selling us death, distraction, while they destroy who we were and what we are capable of. The phoenix or the eagle, which is it? This is not just happy in America. It's worldwide. This is just the country I know best. This is just the history I was told. And it doesn't jive. can't see it even though you're in it every day until someone just snaps you from the... So you don't have to go to Europe to see ruins, to see ridiculous architecture made by people that are long gone. We need to figure out who we are and claim this land. I mean, all over the world. Claim our rightful place and take it back. Because if we can create this without power tools, maybe we're looking at power wrong. If we can make things like this with a different kind of energy, one that's perhaps wireless, as evidenced by this photograph here in 1890, San Francisco, then I think all we have to do is figure out who exactly benefits from us not knowing that. And there's a lot more of us than them. It's just unbelievable. South Station in Boston again with this Phoenix here. It's unbelievable, y'all. Sky trains in 1905. Man. Castle in the middle of your city. I'm looking at you, Buffalo. I'm looking at you, Atlantic City. I'm looking at you, Symphony Hall, Boston. Syracuse, huh? Syracuse, 1904. Give me a break. Temple of Commerce, Boston, 1906.
That's a Greek temple right there. That looks like the Parthenon.
Mm-hmm. This is Galveston, Texas, in 1890. Galveston, Texas. Now this is gone. Completely gone. Just a sandy beach. Why? Why? Because this doesn't look like something cowboys build. This looks like something out of the distant past, which raises so many questions. Is the past even that distant? And are those people any different from us across the sea in any direction? They can lie about every structure in America and the entire history of the second largest nation in the world. They can convince fucking 350 million people of a lie. Unbelievable, man. I've looked at these pictures for years now, and I can't get over it. Detroit, 1909. Look at Detroit today and tell me you think we're making progress. Yeah, right. What's actually happening is they're destroying them, building new ones. Fine, build a new one. Build a new one that looks like this. They can't do it. They can build these shit signs. They can put flags on antennas and pretend that's what they're for. They can pretend this is a basement and it was intentional. They can pretend all they want. Bye, Earth. I'll be back.
Yeah, I mean, quite stunning. That's our intro. Let's go to Exhibit B. So this is a generic documentary. It has nothing to do with conspiracies or mud flood. It's just a documentary on Penn Station in New York. Look how ornate that is.
No one was really convinced that Penn Station would really be demolished.
I mean, look how stunning that is. I mean, that looks completely like a Greek temple. Why would the original Penn Station look like a Greek temple? That's kind of strange. I mean, look at those cabs parked out front. Does anybody find this kind of strange? Two-way militia says Masonic nobility of Pharaoh. The original Masons built them. The New World Order Templar tore them down.
That New York would permit this monumental act of vandalism against one of the largest and finest landmarks of its age. Any city gets what it admires.
I mean, and look how stunning that is on the inside. Like, that looks like an exterior street, but that's the inside of the old Penn Station.
And will pay for, and ultimately deserves. And we will probably be judged not by the monuments we build, but the monuments we destroy. Ada Louise Huxtable.
One of the worst things that's happened in New York's history is the loss of Penn Station. Penn was so traumatic.
I mean, does anybody else think it's weird that there are Greek columns in a train station? I mean, just take a step back. Like try to really be objective. Just remove any preconceived notions of anything and just look at this image here. Look at the people here and look at those Greek columns in the background. I mean, look how gigantic they are. Just absolutely gigantic.
Because this was something that belonged to everybody and that people felt was so beautiful and that they were so proud of, that they just took it for granted and felt that it, you know, it couldn't possibly be torn down. Could you tear down the Grand Canyon?
It was like,
I mean, just look at how stunning that is. Just absolutely stunning. I mean, look at that. And all, like, again, just looking at images like this, it's like it doesn't match. It doesn't match the people, their vehicles. It doesn't match. That's a Greek temple right there. Did they really just smash all that?
Efficiency, or that the profiting from new construction.
They really just threw all those statues away? That's sad. That's really sad. They just smashed it all up. But yeah, I mean, look at that. That is absolutely stunning. And that just does not match New York City in any way. Alright, let's go to the next exhibit. So this is Lucius Aurelian.
In 1718 by the Kingdom of France at the time, the city has changed hands a few times, being under the jurisdiction of the Kingdom of Spain, the First Republic of France, and the United States. It's a beautiful city, and it's been with us since 1718, but of course they'll tell us that it was founded, so I guess any year in the United States is just not enough time to say that we actually built a city. Or they're just being honest with us in a way. We look at one of the original plans of New Orleans and we see an incredible star fort structure around it from this rendering, supposedly composed in 1763. Very beautiful, and yet fascinating that there are so many plots of land planned out for structures that don't exist yet. And what was the original function of the star fort that was built around the city? Is it still there? Are there signs of it under the ground? It's very intriguing when we consider the fact that we believe that star forts are a sign of earlier civilizations, and we see no lack of it for this composition planning out New Orleans. How was it that the French knew that New Orleans was going to accede to such an incredible city? Regardless, it's very beautiful, and let's take a look at an 1851 bird's eye view. Very beautiful, well built out buildings in 8 position planning out New Orleans. How was it that the French knew that New Orleans was going to accede to such an incredible city? Regardless, it's very beautiful, and let's take a look at an 1851 bird's eye view. Now this is after New Orleans was under the jurisdiction of the United States. And look at this. Very beautiful, well built out buildings in 1851. And not just the landmark buildings that we'd expect to see. We see beautiful columns, beautiful towers. It's very staggering to consider all the detail that you already see in 1851. It's also interesting that we see that all of these buildings appear to be either masonry, stone, granite, limestone. We see beautiful domes. What exactly to make of this? The official historical account will tell us that in the 18th century, the 1700s, there was a great fire in New Orleans, and that's what necessitated the building of all these incredible buildings. Yet I can't help but consider the fact that perhaps we're looking at the remnants of a true old world city. Look at all the pediments and the columns that are already present. And there's also a lot of strife associated with New Orleans. I know that other explorers have looked at it very closely, and I know they've been amazed, and one could spend all day just looking at this 1851 bird's eye view of New Orleans and just being amazed at the detail in the architecture and all the effort that had to be expended to complete all these buildings. It's also interesting in the fact that we consider that New Orleans is a city that has lost a lot of its architecture over time. In other
Well, like almost every other city, as all of this is being erased, of course.
words, many of the buildings have been destroyed, and we'll be looking at that here in the video to consider some of these beautiful buildings that have been lost. Others are still with us, fortunately. However, considering the entire picture of New Orleans, originally founded in 1718, changing hands from the French to the Spanish after the 7 Years' War, the French-Indian War as it was called in the United States, or in America at the time, and then going over to the First French Republic during the Napoleonic era, and then back to the United States after the Louisiana Purchase in the early 19th century, which is where a lot of interesting world events happened. We look at other pictures of the city and we see the same kind of beauty, the very well built out buildings, the domes, the towers in the distance, and it's quite amazing. I'm also forced to consider what happened to the star fort that surrounded the city originally. Was that just something that was drawn in that old rendering, or was that something that really existed? There are some small star forts that still exist around New Orleans, and yet looking at other renderings, we're no less amazed by what we see with the detail with these incredibly beautiful buildings, these tall obelisks, and all these domes.
You know what else is kind of crazy with the star forts? I mean, obviously those deserve their own podcast, but I mean, was Stargate really a documentary? I mean, the more you look at a lot of these Hollywood reveals, so to speak, some of these supposedly science fiction concepts, and the more out there they are, the more it seems there might have been something to it. Because if there was a worldwide civilization, I mean, yeah, maybe they traveled via airships, but maybe there also was advanced travel by teleportation, not unlike the Philadelphia experiment.
They're everywhere at the same time. Of course, defenders of the mainstream account will tell us that there was ample time, that it all makes sense, that 1718 to now was plenty of time, and of course the fire at the end of the 18th century is what necessitated the construction of all these buildings, and it was apparently no problem. And there's even another explanation, the fact that this was supposed to be a prime colonial city for the French. Okay, it makes sense, and yet it sure seems like the French let go of the city, along with the entire Louisiana Purchase, rather easily, despite the fact that Napoleon was in charge. Oh well, make of it what you will. Looking here, we see the beautiful cathedral that we'll be taking a look at later and examining in full detail, and the St. Louis or St. Louis Cathedral, however you want to pronounce it. Supposedly under control of both the French and the Spanish, and the Spanish did renovations to it. The French originally built it. It's been added to it, has a conflicting account with it. Also look at what you see here, though, right off of the Mississippi with some of the beautiful and well-developed buildings. Now, of course, we can always say that these composed pictures could have been done at any point in time, and that's very true. And any artist can paint whatever they want to, or they can depict whatever they want to. So does this necessarily prove anything? The answer is no. But it's very interesting to consider that either this was someone's imagination, or they were looking at something that was real, and they were interpreting what they saw as real. What year did it really happen? Well, we know how many conflicting accounts that we have in the 19th century. If you've watched this channel before, it's quite an intriguing premise to consider. There's never any shortage of things to see where it comes to Louisiana and New Orleans. We see the depiction here of the cathedral, and is this really a picture? Is this some sort of sketch picture? It's hard to say. It's certainly not of the best quality. And yet we see other painted pictures where we see the same thing. Domes and towers in the distance, and yet a very well built out waterfront. What exactly is this reflecting to us? It seems to be showing us that New Orleans was a very well built out city, and that's one of the reasons why I opted for the last Old World city. There's a lot of evidence that New Orleans was perhaps the last fully intact Old World city before it was altered over time. If we go with the Five Eras theory as our primary theory for what we're considering with the presence of previous civilizations that we're not supposed to talk about and we're not supposed to consider. We look at some other actual photos of New Orleans, and we see again the very well built out residential area with the beautiful bell towers and the other beautiful towers, and we look at all this effort that went into it. We're also well aware of the fact that New Orleans, based on its position with the Mississippi and the Gulf of Mexico and the surrounding waterways, is susceptible to flooding. Pretty much anyone who's been around longer than 10 years is well aware of what's happened with the hurricanes in the past, most notably Hurricane Katrina. Here we see another one of these pictures where we have the horses pulling the trolley, and we see this very well built out cobblestone roadway. And these pictures, we're told, are either from the 1890s to the 1920s. Of course, what's the actual time? You can always ask questions. Is this photo from the 1890s or is it from a later portion in time? Of course, when you see horses pulling the trolley, you'll automatically think, well, it must be from before the 1890s.
Again, looking at some of these images, I mean, it's obviously very difficult to be truly objective because you have to really literally forget everything you think you know and then looking at it from that lens. Lord Zed in the chat says, I'm just sure there's a connection with the fact that the Moors were defeated in 1492 by Queen Isabella. Then immediately afterwards, she sent Columbus to the Americas. Old Man Chiba says, I wonder how much time and many people would be involved in creating blueprints for those buildings without AutoCAD, electricity, almost no communication, just blueprints for crazy symmetrical buildings, not to mention the complexity of these buildings.
When they electrified the trolleys, as we just seem to have electricity go across the entire nation of the United States in a very rapid amount of time. Beautiful photos, though, and beautiful buildings, and look at this kind of detail. And when you compare the elaborate architecture and detail that went in this one building, and then look at the roadway around it, it's definitely the conflicting account that you see in the picture itself. It paints an entirely different picture from a city that we're told was around since 1718, but had to be rebuilt from a fire, because that's always the story. Isn't this interesting when you see these buildings here and the tracks in the road? And again, it goes back to the question, what came first, the tracks or the road? Here we have President McKinley addressing the august body of New Orleans in 1901 prior to his unfortunate assassination at the World's Fair in Buffalo. Very beautiful building, and yet it doesn't exactly look like what remains there today. There seem to be some subtle differences. And we see other gorgeous buildings, and how many of these buildings are still there in New Orleans, and how many have unfortunately been torn down over the years. It seems to be a situation in many cities across the United States where you have certain buildings that seem to have survived and yet other ones that have not. And look at this very vast crowd here, and look at some of the buildings that we see with some of the beautiful towers. And look at the variance in the towers that you see. You've got bell towers, you've got some of the more traditional towers that we see, and unique designs. It's obvious, though, that there is nothing within this city that really escapes our attention to detail when we see these gigantic columns in this building. Very beautiful. And how long has it really been there? What was the original construction behind it?
Well, also compare this to all the other buildings that were easy to build, like easier, just the regular buildings next to it. The interior is quite plain. And then you have this building with these kinds of columns and ornate construction. I mean, it's completely different.
Well, New Orleans is known in the United States for the War of 1812, where we had General Charlton Heston, General Andrew Jackson, who led what was perhaps the greatest American victory of the War of 1812. And if you know anything about the official account of the War of 1812, the United States military didn't exactly perform well there. But we'll start by looking at our star forts around New Orleans. Fort Macomb and Fort Pike. Fort Pike is very well preserved, and Fort Macomb is not so well preserved, being grown over. However, it does show us that there are the presence of star forts in the New Orleans area. And we always suspect that star forts represent the previous civilization. Now here's Fort Macomb we'll look at first, and it's very well grown over, but yet you can still see the fine details and shapes, the geometric shapes that always accompany a star fort. And there's a lot of theories for what these smaller star forts may have represented. Were they drains, or were they some sort of valve control system? Here's Fort Pike, and we can see that it's much more well-maintained. And we go back to that theory of drains, and perhaps there's something to that with the fact that both these star forts are right on the entryway of the Mississippi going past New Orleans. Not sure, but it's very beautiful when you look at the geometric patterns, and the preservation on it's amazing.
I'm going to overlay something here in a second that I think is kind of curious. Not exact, but interesting. Interesting, some of these shapes. Very interesting.
We'll be told by the official historical account, though, that these star forts were constructed from 1819 to 1824 because bricks were in abundant supply and transporting these things were no issue. Logistics was just not a problem in the 19th century. Even though you didn't have motor transportation at the time, railways supposedly were limited, and it was also very difficult in terms of logistically sustaining the workforce that would have been required, human and animal, to build such a structure. However, we go with the historical account, and it was only 5 years, and they managed to complete these amazing structures that stand today, even if they're grown over. Yes, they had cannons. Yes, they could defend it. And just look at the detail and the symmetry in this wall. And also pay attention to the ridges there near the top of it. It's quite an incredible image, and it reflects the fact that there seems to have been a previous civilization that was very obviously present in Louisiana. Well, anyway, that's enough star forts. Let's take a look at the city hell. What the hell is this? Brutalist architecture, 1950s building? This is the city hall? How did this get in the presentation? Who's responsible for this? Oh, there we go. Gallier Hall, built 1845 to 1853.
Christopher Lambert, always welcome.
The original City Hall of New Orleans. And the unfortunate tragedy is we see that many of these beautiful old municipal buildings have been replaced by these lovely, and I say that in all sarcasm, brutalist architecture buildings of the
City Hall? City Hell? Hall? Interesting.
1950s and beyond. But here we see a more traditional, quote-unquote, neoclassical building with the columns and the pediment, and we can see that this is a very worthy city hall for any city anywhere in the world. So why exactly did they have to replace this one? Well, you'll find the usual slew of reasons that, well, it just wasn't meeting the needs at the time, it wasn't large enough, or they just didn't have enough rooms for people to sit around and wait for their bureaucratic processes to be completed. Very beautiful building, and very impressive that it was supposedly built in the mid-19th century, although we certainly question that. There's almost though there's something even more gorgeous about this particular pediment, and I can't quite put my finger on it. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments. I love the interiors too. Now, even though they're not using this as a city hall, we should be thankful that this building continues to survive. I love the interiors because while they may not be as well decorated, or at least putting as much artistic decoration in this building, it does give the impression though of the quality of this building. And you can get the feeling that this is a building where you would feel that relaxed, inspired feeling just walking in. And yet we still see some of the artistic beauty on the ceiling with the chandeliers and of course the usual checkerboard floor pattern. I also wonder how much of this has been due to the quote-unquote renovations that occur to where they're making this building appear, how shall we say, a little bit more modest on the inside than what was originally intended. I love the entryway here too with the columns and the doorway. Very, very large door, but you remember that saying from an LA story from Steve Martin, you're nobody in the city unless you have a very large door. And of course the old city hall had a very large door.
And I won't get into this here, but I mean, gigantic doorways seem to have been a thing for quite some time. Some believe the Tartarians were very, very tall. Giants, maybe?
I have a feeling the new one doesn't have a large door, but we're not going to look. Very beautiful. Look at this hallway. You can still see the signs of what a gorgeous building this was in its prime. And frankly, it's still in its prime. The fact that it's still standing and they haven't torn it down says a lot. Look at the pillars there integrated in the wall, the chandeliers in the ceiling again, and of course the floor. You know, even the stairways, you can still see some of the details in the banister that survive, and that's something else to look for when you look at these old municipal buildings. I wonder if you could possibly enjoy being in the modern New Orleans City Hall as much as you would enjoy being in this building. Well, I'm sure there are some people who enjoy sitting around having their bureaucratic processes take all day, or several weeks, or months, depending on the case. This is another one of these rooms where you just get that feeling of beauty and decor, even though it looks a little bit modest by what we've seen in some of the other old world buildings. Well, let's move on to the Eleanor McMain Secondary School from 1932. This is an Art Deco secondary school. Now, we've only really seen one Art Deco school in Salt Lake City so far in the explorations on this channel. And I thought this one was interesting to consider as well because this building is still with us, but it's another building, unfortunately, that's fallen prey, if you will, to the Art Deco renovation. Now, we'll be told it's because they had to redo the building, they had to renovate it because it was so poorly made at the time that it just wasn't meeting the standards, and that's always when here you see it with some of this beautiful detail. And Art Deco is always interesting for that very reason. Look at some of these pillars and the beautiful ornate decorations on it. All for a school. And it's always intriguing when we consider the fact that these schools were so well adorned and so beautifully decorated. You could actually see this achieving the purpose of inspiring education, as though education was about how to think and not what to think. What to think being what's only in a book or what's cataloged in a book, and you have to abide by anything that's in a book. We like to think that books represent a time when information was more free and it was more open. But is that necessarily true? That's a fallacy of belief that we have to consider. It was a very beautiful building, and of course we're told that it eroded over time. It started to deteriorate, as all these old world buildings that are somehow miraculously still standing do, and so therefore they had to renovate it. And this is the renovation. Now, it's nice that the building's still standing, but you can get the feeling that there's something about the renovation that just doesn't quite feel right intuitively. It's almost as though I can hear this building crying out in its pain that this decoration just doesn't seem right. I mean, which one looks more beautiful to you? The interior, though, survives a little bit because we still have one of these beautiful auditoriums, and it looks like the ceiling of the auditorium has been unaltered, and you can see the area around the stage there. That's very gorgeous. I always love the auditoriums in these older schools. And what exactly are they telling us? That's something we have to consider. And now we go to the Hibernia Bank Building, built in 1921. So you could say this is Art Deco or a little pre-Art Deco, depending on what the design philosophy behind it was.
And check out the top of that building. It's just, I mean, again with the Greek columns. I mean, just again, all these photos. It's not like there's any other types of buildings halfway built in the background.
Or how they decide to designate the building. However, we see a very unique design with a beautiful building that's decorated. It has a pediment up top, and then there's even the little cupola up top. I wonder if that was originally a dome or something else. This is a rather unique building in the fact that we've seen other buildings like this. This somewhat reminds me of the layout of the Plummer Building in Rochester, Minnesota.
I also wonder if part of the design of all these cathedrals or cathedral, and the domes on top, do they represent the entire world if it has a dome? So then they built, as above, so below. They built the buildings to reflect the bigger building, the entire building of Earth.
However, it's unique and beautiful in its own way, especially with this cupola up top. Not a dome, but a little bit of a beehive pattern, it looks like. Hard to tell exactly. I even like the little parapet appearance there above the columns. Very, very unique. And even the pediment itself looks unique. And looking at it from different angles, we can see that no detail was spared. Again, in the 1920s, this was just no problem to throw up a building like this. And this is even before the time of Huey Long, the very famous governor of Louisiana. Ken Burns did a documentary on him too, by the way. And currently, this is apparently a residential complex, and I could see why this would be a beautiful pool to be swimming at, especially if you have that kind of background image with those beautiful pillars and the pediment there. You can see why that would be a very inspiring image. Although I decided to take a look at what renting a room in this building would be. It's a little pricey. Well, look at that column there and that beautiful decorative detail. And this is what one of those one-room apartments would look like, and if the prices are accurate, for the low price of $2,000 a month, you could rent yourself a one-bedroom apartment in the Hibernia building in New Orleans today. I don't know. I guess it's up to you to decide if it's worth it or not. I think you know where I sit on the matter. Now let's look at the Lakefront Airport. Started construction in 1929 and opened in the mid-1930s. This was supposedly at the orders of Governor Huey Long. What a beautiful airport. Imagine going to an airport like this every day. We think of our modern experiences in airports, and it's just nothing but hassle and difficulty. And yet, just coming to this terminal, you'll say it's smaller, but look at the beautiful decorative detail. The very height of Art Deco buildings. I like all the images and the figures on the front of it. You feel like you're actually going to ascend in the sky, and you can see why this would be an airport that people really want to go to. And then look at the interior of it with the ceiling and the walls and all the beautiful decoration. All this for an airport? I'm not complaining. I mean, I would love to have all of our airports look like this today. You would actually look forward to going to the airport. I have a feeling that the process that you have to go through in the airport would probably be more efficient too. Not that I'm saying that things in the past were better, but, at least from an aesthetic appearance, or at least from an aesthetic aspect, things looked a heck of a lot better. So I don't know. What do you think? How would you feel going to an airport like this every day? And of course, it's also used as a wedding venue, which, as I've joked in other videos, that's kind of our test to know if something's a true...
Skip through a little bit here.
Today, though, gives us that impression. They have the bellhops to help you carry in your luggage from the back of your horse-drawn cart. And again, look at the cobblestones. To be an incredibly beautiful place to see. And to be the ceiling as well. I'm just astounded by the fact that there were 3 St. Charles hotels that were told in New Orleans in the 19th century, and that this was the 3rd one that was supposedly constructed in the 1890s. You'll never guess how the previous 2 were lost to us. Look at this. You really get the feeling for the skylight here. And this is the kind of beauty, these are the sort of things that I enjoy seeing in these old buildings. And of course, we don't have the St. Charles Hotel anymore, because why would anybody want this kind of luxury or this kind of experience staying in a hotel? It's interesting to me, though, how this is cataloged and how many of our modern integral journal sources still keep these pictures and still refer to this as a very beautiful building. So even the mainstream seems to agree with our aesthetic appraisal. And here is the first St. Charles Hotel. Unfortunately, it was lost in a fire. Of course. Always the fires that just seem to strike very specific buildings, except for the other fires that strike more wide areas. Look at some of the beautiful columns there and the interior. And you even have a pediment on the interior. So again, no detail spared. Some of these surviving buildings that harken back to an earlier civilization at different times. And you see the central tower and the 2 subsidiary towers. Originally, they supposedly weren't pointed. They were a little bit more rounded. And yet you see the columns in the front facade and the buildings around it with a pediment on it. And I think this reflects the original old world identity that still survives to this day from New Orleans. And I think this is one of the reasons why New Orleans is one of the most incredible examples of a true old world city. Yes, you might have noticed they've tried to conceal it by building new buildings, such as the lovely current City Hall from the 1950s. But so much of it still endures. And looking at the interior of this cathedral, we're just struck by the incredible beauty. We're struck by the fact that the ceiling is so well decorated, and this building is so unbelievably old.
Riz in the chat says, "Yup, fire destroyed concrete and marble. Totally believable."
Yet it's been renovated and changed and rebuilt many times. But how old is it really? And I'm still wondering, in the design and construction of it, you don't really see many other cathedrals like it, at least in the United States. But of course people say, well, it's because they were inspired by the decoration in Europe. Of course they were. Here's a little bit of a video from it. Of the South in the United States. And keep in mind that this was only 20 years after the U.S. Civil War. Expo are very difficult to come by, but this is supposedly one of the photos of the main building. And that's right, made out of your balsa wood and your leftover popsicle sticks. No problem.
Yeah, I don't know. That whole narrative that it was basically paper mache that made these world fairs and expos. I mean, I don't know. That seems kind of weird, especially that certain buildings still survive today that are solid stone and marble. So clearly they weren't paper mache.
So easy to construct and so easy to tear down because we just had all the time and resources in the 19th century. Again, something unique when it comes to the design and construction of religious buildings. The Parish Prison, 1834. Very nice prison. Although I think of the one that we saw in Anamosa, Iowa, while it may not compare completely to that, it's still very impressive with a little cupola over there. And why do you need that on a prison? Very interesting. This looks like a state capitol. And of course,
Yeah, that looks quite stunning. That looks like another stunning Greek temple there. Wow.
of course, this is one that was lost to fire. Beautiful dome, columns all over the place, and the beautiful pediment. It was stated that this is one of the most beautiful buildings in the United States at the time. Of course, that's the official account. And who knows what the ground truth reality is. Still, a hotel. They're saying this was a hotel in the 19th century.
That seems kind of weird.
Imagine if we could get a hotel built like this today. Well, this one vanished by fire, supposedly in the 1850s, so they replaced it with this one, the second St. Charles Hotel. Looks just like the first one, minus the dome on top. So, what's really going on here?
I still can't get over how it doesn't match. Like these giant Greek temples, they don't match the horse and buggy people in the front. They just don't match.
Again, another conflicting account. I'm not sure what to make of this. The second St. Charles Hotel, though, was actually used during the Civil War as the headquarters of the military governor of New Orleans, and that's Major General Benjamin Butler. Yes, Benjamin Butler, who was the military governor, dictator of New Orleans during the Civil War. And he had some very controversial policies, although his authoritarian and oppressive leadership style did help reduce the outbreak of fever in New Orleans, which it was supposedly susceptible to. This guy looks kind of familiar. He almost looks like someone took actor Dennis Franz and melted him in the microwave for a few minutes. I have to wonder if Benjamin Butler ever served in some sort of official capacity as the governor of Wisconsin or perhaps the mayor of Madison. His authoritarian policies would go very popular there. What's he wearing there? Is that supposed to be some kind of uniform? That's very interesting. Where have I seen that before? Oh yeah, those dress uniforms in Star Trek The Next Generation. I was wondering where they got that idea from. Quick, number one, put on your butler uniform. Luxana Troy is coming again. All right, back on topic. French Opera House, 1910. And again, we see the surrounding roadways there, and we always have these opera houses that seem to be in every large city and small town across the United States from the 19th century. Everybody needed to have an opera house. Even if your town only had 300 people, you needed to have an opera house. You weren't getting in the stagecoach and riding over to the nearby town. Oh, no. You had to have the opera house there. How could you even have enough acts to go around all these opera houses?
In these semi-deserted cities. Yeah, that's a good question.
Gilbert Academy, 1888. Look at the tower on that. That's very unique. And, of course, the central construction there. You know, if this was in another state, we'd probably be told this is a school for the blind or a school for the deaf. Because, you know, if there's one thing blind people need to help them get around, it's multiple floor buildings. Yes, don't question that one. And the Horticulture Hall, one of the remnants, lost buildings from the Cotton Exposition or the Centennial Exposition or whatever name you want to assign to it. Very beautiful building. And again, something else that unfortunately we've lost because of the natural progression, the renewal as we'll call it, in the United States. The Inn Terminal, 1902, very interesting.
And why are they called terminals? Are they terminals?
We have this large, what looks to be a hangar. Of course, we'll be told that this is just a cover area for a train station. Wonder why this one was lost. Very interesting tower, and you know, you need to have a 3 or 4 floor tower so you can actually run a proper train station, I guess. Well, let me know in the comments what you think this building really is, because I always enjoy hearing your opinions on it, because I think you're very accurate with some of your impressions. And now looking at the Moresque building. Built in 1859, but they had to stop it during the Civil War, and I guess
Moore-esque building?
Benjamin Butler was not giving any authoritarian or oppressive orders to continue construction on this building, but they managed to complete it right after the Civil War. Very unique and very beautiful. And what architectural style does this represent, I wonder? Not something that we see a lot of. The Public Library in 1908. Yes, little dome there, pediment in the columns. You know, the only public library I've seen that really matches this one in bizarre factor has to be the one I looked at in La Crosse, Wisconsin, way back in one of the early explorations, the one that looked like it was lifted from some sort of fairy tale. And I like, again, how you have the stairs that go up to the main entrance. So why don't all public libraries still look like this today? Not sure. The Orleans Parish Criminal Courts, 1880s. And look at that beautiful clock tower and numerous towers on that. Well, of course you need a court building that looked like that at the time. It gives all the people that are coming in there to have their judgments read to them the feeling that they're going into a building that reflects authority. And of course you have a large clock tower on it at the time. And people tell me, well, it's so people could check their time, because nobody had pocket watches in the 19th century. Got a video coming up on that as well. The second Masonic temple, built in 1892. Wonder what the first one looked like.
The Masonic temple. They're not even hiding that one.
Again, no detail spared there with the beautiful large windows and the incredible towers. Again, many different architectural styles, and you know, for this particular exploration, I'm not so concerned about what they're labeling these as, whether it's Gothic, Victorian Revival, Imperial, or whatever. Southern Rail Depot, 1908. Look at the intricacy with this one. And you see some of these large mason stones and the interesting foundation, and then look at the front window on this. This isn't exactly the kind of building that I'm certainly used to seeing. Very unique. A railway depot that looks like that. And the Toro Shakespeare Almshouse, 1882. Almshouse was basically the way they said poorhouse. And of course you need a very well-built and unique poorhouse or almshouse with the large portal windows. And looks like it's 3 floors. I wonder what the foundation's like, and I wonder how deep in the foundation it really goes. Very intriguing. And Temple Sinai, built 1872. 1872. Gorgeous building like this being built in New Orleans. Very tragic that we don't have this building to still go see, because I would love to see the interior of this. And
Doesn't it just look weird having that vehicle in the front there? I mean, these are two different. They're from two different realms. I mean, these are two different realms here.
I could not find any interior photos of this beautiful building. But what do you think of it? Well, that concludes our exploration of New Orleans, and as General Charlton Heston, Andrew Jackson said, we have an incredible city here, and he successfully defended it in the War of 1812, one of the few American victories from that war. You know, I wonder, am I going to be lampooned for my poor pronunciation of French words for the rest of my life? Thanks for joining me. Please like, comment, and subscribe.
Wow. All right, let's go to the next exhibit here. And this is from a non-conspiracy channel. It's just from a standard channel. It is Kings and Things. America's Lost Architecture. Get a few different perspectives here.
Been founded about 250 years ago, the United States of America is a relatively young country. In line with this, it's also got a fairly modern image in terms of architecture, exemplified in the gleaming skyscrapers of its great cities. But on a closer inspection, many of these skyscrapers are in fact built in traditional styles, and you could say that they make up the tip of the iceberg of America's rich classical tradition. From the monumental architecture of Washington, D.C. to quaint country houses and regional revivalist styles, the United States has a lot to offer. Even so, some of its greatest works of classical architecture have unfortunately been lost, and in this video I'm going to be showcasing a few of them.
Yeah, I mean, again, the original Penn Station, I mean, it looks like it could be something out of, you know, ancient Rome, Petra, the Middle East, Egypt. Just look how ginormous this thing is.
In the late 19th century, Chicago was growing at a rapid pace, and many of the city's public buildings quickly became used beyond their intended capacity. One such case was the structure known as the United States Custom House, Courthouse, and Post Office. It had only been erected in 1880, but
So again, this Kings and Things channel is it's just a standard official narrative, coincidence theorist, authority worshipping cultist type channel. I just thought this video was quite interesting, documenting that,
Since the
so you could see how obvious
city's population more than doubled in
the
the next
differences
decade,
are
it was
here.
demolished in This was the Chicago Federal Building. Designed by local architect Henry Ives Cobb, it was constructed over a steel frame with exterior walls of brick and was sheathed with 500,000 square feet or 46,000 square meters of grey granite from Maine.
They shipped the granite from Maine? This is supposedly the official narrative here.
Laid out in the shape of a Greek cross, it featured Corinthian porticos in each direction and was capped by a 100 feet or 30 meter tall gilt dome. In total, the building was 16 stories tall. On the inside, it was richly decorated, and the four wings met under the dome to form an octagonal rotunda, which was actually larger than the one in the United States Capitol.
Has anybody been able to find any kind of photos of the construction, or even drawn diagrams?
Having been finished in 1905, the Chicago Federal Building would eventually meet its end in 1965 when it was demolished.
Why would it ever be demolished?
The site is now occupied by the Federal Plaza, designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe in the International style. In 1896, the wealthy Singer Corporation, best known as a manufacturer of sewing machines, decided to build its new headquarters at the northwestern corner of Liberty Street and Broadway in New York City. The 10-story tall building was made in the elegant Beaux-Arts style, with a facade of stone and red brick, and was topped by a mansard roof. Although an impressive building, it had been turned into a true icon through an addition made between 1906 and 1908. Its architect, Ernest Flagg, was brought back to design a tower, which would give the structure a total of 41 stories, and at a height of 612 feet or 187 meters, it had become the tallest building in the world. Flagg deplored how modern skyscrapers grew upward from the very edge of their plots, making narrow ravines of the city streets below. Thus, he decided that the tower should be set back from the street, giving the building its unconventional, narrow shape.
You know, it's weird. In a lot of these photos or diagrams, it's really hard to tell what are they doing here. Are they really building, or are they making improvements? Like, what exactly are they doing?
Its top included a 50-foot or 15-meter tall dome capped by a lantern where visitors could pay the equivalent of $14 in today's value to enjoy views of the city. Especially noteworthy was also the lavishly decorated lobby.
I mean, that is quite the lobby. I mean, wow. Wow.
Which was said to exude, quote, celestial radiance.
Celestial radiance? Interesting.
But the Singer Building was only the world's tallest for about a year, losing the position in 1909. By the 1960s, the Singer Corporation had decided to move out of the old building, and its small floors made it unappealing for redevelopment at the time. Thus, in 1968, it gained a new record, becoming the tallest building ever to be demolished.
Why would you ever demolish that to put up some kind of crap like this? I mean, it just doesn't jive. Why would a building like that ever be demolished? I mean, it seems like you'd want to preserve that for all time.
Since its completion in 1973, the site has been occupied by One Liberty Plaza. Another of New York's great lost landmarks is Pennsylvania Station.
Again, that's just absolutely stunning. I mean, not just the design, but the sheer size of this thing. I mean, this was an entire city block. And not a small city block, a New York City block. I mean, wow.
Originally opened in 1910, the vast structure was widely praised for its majestic architecture, and in its heyday it served 100 million people a year traveling to and from the city by rail. It featured an imposing facade of granite equipped with sturdy Doric columns.
Again, how did they ship all that granite in there? Like, how did they construct how did they how did they construct the building with the columns? I mean, this is horse and buggy times.
The main waiting room was inspired by the baths of Caracalla in ancient Rome and was the largest indoor space in the city. Covering 1.5 city blocks, it was clad in travertine marble and drenched in sunlight through its great vaulted windows.
That's all marble? I mean, wow. Wow. I mean, it almost looks like a palace for giants, doesn't it? Because why would you need indoor space that big?
Soaring 150 feet or 45 meters above the chamber.
150 feet?
The concourse, by contrast, was made up of a forest of undecorated steel columns expressing its utilitarian function. Trains arrived through tunnels and were therefore by necessity driven by electricity instead of coal. It also made use of an innovative vertical layout in which inbound and outbound trains were stacked.
Shelby in the chat suggested an airship hangar. That could make sense. I mean, it's certainly the space is there.
To prevent congestion.
And the fact that it's just one open area instead of many different floors. So if there was an airship, they can kind of float up, I guess.
The man who had envisioned this temple to transportation was Alexander Cassatt, the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad Company. Up until the early 20th century, they lacked direct access to New York, with the lines terminating on the opposite banks of the Hudson River. This problem was finally solved by the construction of underground tunnels, allowing them to reach the city and to construct this grand terminal. Designed by McKim, Mead & White, one of the country's leading architectural firms, it was intended as a monument for the ages. But it would only last for about 50 years. The decline in passenger traffic following World War II made it increasingly unprofitable, and despite public backlash, the building was demolished in 1966.
Yeah, why would you ever demolish a building like that? Again, there are people who protest the demolishing of smaller, crappy buildings just because of historical value. I mean, is there anything more historically valuable than a building like that?
Its underground concourses were then remodeled into the modern Pennsylvania Station, while Madison Square Garden and Pennsylvania Plaza were built above. The City Hall of San Francisco stands as an impressive example of the beauty and grandeur advocated in early 20th century urban planning.
I mean, look, that looks like a palace from St. Petersburg or some of these major European cities. I mean, just an absolute palace. Why would that ever be used as a city hall?
But when it was built in the 1910s, it actually succeeded an earlier, even grander building. The old City Hall was a massive structure covering 2 blocks and inspired by France's opulent Second Empire style. Rising above its meandering facade were 5 separate towers and a giant dome topped with a gleaming statue holding a torch. In front of it stood the Pioneer Monument, now moved to a different location, and there was also a separate dome structure called the Hall of Records.
The Hall of Records. I wonder what was there in the Hall of Records of this just astonishing building.
The complex was designed by Canadian architect Augustus Laver and stood more or less completed in 1899 after 27 years of planning and construction. It had by then gone far over budget, and the project was tainted by corruption and incompetence. It had also taken much longer to build than planned because the city refused to take loans, meaning that construction stopped whenever they were short on money. Furthermore, the quality of the building was highly questionable, and parts of it had begun to break even before it was finished. As a final bad omen, it was constructed over the city's first cemetery, the resting place of over 8,000 dead who had to be moved.
That's kind of weird.
When the 1906 San Francisco earthquake hit, the building came crumbling down, having stood finished for just 7 years.
So they're saying the building was only stood finished for 7 years. I mean, it's very difficult to corroborate any of this stuff going this far back. But again, one can only wonder if all these earthquakes are simply HARP in an earlier form. Just weather manipulation of the realm.
Damaged beyond repair, it was replaced by the current city hall built a few blocks away.
I mean, the current city hall looks pretty spectacular as well. So that was an official narrative channel. Let's go to the next exhibit here.
Today we'll look at
This is the one and only John Levi.
sights seldom seen. Thanks for being here. God bless and welcome. One of my favorite things to do is check out maps. And this map tool is probably one of the greatest things they've given us. In a lot of parts, especially around the edges where they don't permit travel, things get kind of blurred out. A lot of the oceans blurred out, but otherwise, pretty good. I don't think these images come from satellites. I don't believe in satellites. I don't see them, and I've looked at the stars intimately, the sky, for 20 years now. Just part of the landscape. But one of my favorite things is these grids, the old footprint underneath the cities. The cities take advantage of these layouts, many subdevelopments built on this circuitry. As we can see here in Pahrump, Nevada. Just a wasteland, but yet something surviving. Even here we can see flowage, and it doesn't intrude with these patterns. There's some more over here in California City. California City, the middle of this cooked out wasteland, and we can see that same circuitry. And they're trying. They have been trying for 100 years to get people to move out here and cover up this circuitry, sell it off as neighborhoods, but it's not happening. Here they've packed a little section, really packed them in like sausages, now providing a charge. And these are some of my favorite examples because they're just pretty clear, in my opinion. No fool would lay out a subdevelopment like this unless they were mad. No, but I like it. I mean, it's intelligent design, and it would be very difficult to lay out and to survey, but once it's here, there's no reason not to develop it in the same pattern. No shrubs or trees grow on these lines. And here we can see a super straight Peruvian line jutting out from the city by the dump, of course. Dumps, golf courses, mines. Really a small dump. It doesn't look so dumpy. But anyway, this Peruvian line shooting out from out of the town, and we can follow and follow and follow, and here we go. We start to see a little more undeveloped, pretty much buried and cooked out, but we still see the circuit pattern. And then here we go. Boom.
Yeah, it is really crazy how a lot of the Earth's surface really does look like some kind of electric grid or even a computer motherboard. I'll put up an image of a motherboard here as well. It's uncanny. I mean, it really is uncanny, almost as if there is some kind of purpose to the layout of cities to somehow conduct electricity across the entire surface of the Earth. And we have to wonder, I mean, what role do lightning storms, just lightning, has in all of this? I mean, it is uncanny how just the surface of the Earth does look like a circuit board.
this mega undeveloped circuit footprint. And I don't know, this is so mind-blowing that I feel very comfortable saying I don't know. I always feel comfortable saying I don't know. But anyway, nobody can say they came out here and did this, especially when it exhibits the same pattern as we can see all throughout the realm. And these first examples are just some that I found on my own. There is a master by the name of Gary Shunung, and we've looked at the work of Gary before, but maybe it's been a year or two. And I think Gary somehow, either through curiosity like myself, or through assignment, discovered thousands upon thousands of sites like this. Super anomalous sites. God, I should stretch this out a little. Forgive me. It's a little better. So instead of telling you what I think, I'd rather tell you what Gary has to say here. Gary the man. And I'd rather just play some of his video in the corner here in fast speed so we can impress as much of his discoveries into your being as we just read what Gary has to say. Now that people have had some time to look at the material I've posted, I will share my analysis of what all of this could mean. The videos are pieces of one large video titled From the Brink of Extinction, Ruins of Old Earth. The reason that we can't understand how ancient people with no technology, machinery, or even decent tools could have accomplished what they seem to have been able to do is very simple. They didn't do it. They occupied and used what was available to them from before a near extinction event occurred. And that's it. And this is from August 2012. Here, Gary has come up with the same conclusions. In 2012, a reset inheritors, primitive inheritors that could have not built the sites and wonders and cities that they now occupy. Some of what they used had become exposed by time and erosion, and he talks about the same things we do, the way we look at the Greco-Roman buildings and then push that even further back. Same hand building the same way. He says what is left at Stonehenge could be the center support structure of an ancient dome-shaped building. And I agree. All the ruins, even what is almost unrecognizable, are more advanced than they should be for the time period, for the people occupying the areas. Here he says we've wondered why we can't find evidence of what hit ground in Crater National Park, but have we ever wondered how it could blast a square hole in the ground?
I mean, this is really crazy, just the symmetry of whatever, just these aerial shots of what was here before. It's so perfectly symmetrical. I mean, these clearly are not natural formations in any way.
And this is 2012. It would be interesting to talk to Gary. Is he still on board with the flying bull? Here he's showing us what is advanced grid systems. And these create water, almost as if they were water distribution points, now just cooked. We have them in Utah. Of course they're everywhere. And that's what I love about this man's work. And here he's showing us what looks like New Mexico. Chaco Canyon. Oh, definitely Chaco Canyon. Here a site, another. And what he may not have realized, and he may, is that the very mountains and rocks are also structure, rendered. And I think he does, and that's why he's showing us this. He is absolutely seeing the intelligence in this now looking cooked out site. Now let's look at something else. So next I want to talk about a few ancient sites that have really been underappreciated in my opinion. This is not it, although this is unappreciated as well. The complex engineering we see over the border here is the same thing that we're talking about today. An old grid, an old circuit board. And here we can see that. I mean, just bustling. Everything south of the border is laid out even more complexly than just north of it. And we can again see traces of the same thing that hasn't been covered up. We see the covering up of Star Fortage with golf courses, not even very nice ones. What is this, trash in the middle? And here again, everything showing signs of something that's been totally wiped out. I had planned on jumping back in and going south and exploring all of Mexico. I mean, it really took me on a wild ride how absolutely everywhere this is. But for a quick moment here, I want to look at some of the ruins of Cambodia. Now, we've seen it before, but have we really appreciated how absolutely advanced and in ruins these works are? So there's this place called the Plain of Jars. Giant pots, or what they're calling jars, or what? I think it's not what they tell us. It's been proposed by giant tree theorists that these might be like petrified fruit or berries, and I can appreciate that and have suggested it in the past. But when we look at this one here, we see this intelligently made bevel like a vessel. But of course nothing in this realm is what it seems, because everything has been petrified or rendered something else, some other material, through intense baking or a past reset. And it's not so crazy. I mean, all the pieces to the puzzle are here. Oh, how did it get so hot and cook? Well, there was a campaign. Again, just putting their puzzle pieces together.
I mean, another question I kind of had was also, what is with the rollout of, let's say, Google Earth, Google Maps, just to be able to view all this? It's almost like it's all hidden in plain sight. Was this released by design? Kind of like some speculate the flat Earth theory was kind of, it was a controlled release, regardless of whether true or untrue. Like, the powers that be could have totally censored, I mean, as they do. I mean, there are certain military facilities that are censored on the aerials. Like, they could have, like, smooth mapped all of the overhead and in the satellite mapping and not shown it. But here it's kind of clear for anybody to see, almost like it's hidden in plain sight. I mean, again, is this all revelation of the method where it's some kind of a requirement to have this public?
Here we have this beautiful, but kind of unknown, plain of jars, and just megaliths everywhere. We're just getting started. And then we have this Operation Barrel Roll. Look here, the History Channel, maybe. Why has this country been cooked more than any other country? Why? They're asking this question in 2023. And I made a video on it. I'm not sure which one it is. In between 1964 and 73, the Americans dropped over 2 million tons of cluster bees over Laos. More than all the bombs dropped in WW blank combined. And in my past video, I remember it was around the clock carpet cooking for years. Several years around the clock. You saw it there. More than WW combined. The most blasted in history. So what the hell? What are you doing out here? What the hell? Here you can see it today. Little shacklings. Really rough. And here some of the litter left behind. I don't remember it being called Operation Barrel Roll. But this all was concurrent with NAM. Here we go. And we know NAM was a false flagger. Oh, they bombed a ship. The NAM. So NAM, we have the same thing, just spraying and destroying a nation. And right next door, a little side hustle, always the side hustle. Side hustle is 260 million being dropped on poor little Laos. What's going on in Laos? So here we can see NAM, North NAM. Here in the middle is the site of the largest operation of cooking and terraforming. And I have no doubt the cooking and terraforming is going on everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty weird. This is definitely pretty weird. Definitely begs the question, what's so special about that Vietnam area?
Even here in Utah, it was going on before people would have time to realize. North Nam.
Gulf of Tonkin right there on the map.
Down here we see South, we see Thailand, and then down here Cambodia. This was a very important use of tax dollars. And here we are today at the site of the plane of jars. I mean, what could be left after 200 million devices being dropped all around here? Surprised it's so green and looks so nice. But otherwise, nothing should exist. At a quick glance, it looks like what we would be told are rice paddy fields. There we go. That's the excuse over there. Everything rice paddies. So much rice. And I don't know. Here we see this area, and really a great area, and we really wouldn't think anything of it, were it not for the recent tourist type of discoveries, these megaliths, these giant pots, and there is no part of this realm where I haven't found this to be the case. Even out here, in what would seem to be the middle of nowhere, we discovered in a past video that this area was victim to a great cooking. All of these islands, what they call the Marshall Islands, and today there's elitists living out on these islands. And if satellites were real, this would be a very, very sad display of their capabilities. So all of this is a region. According to old maps, this would be east of Tartaria. And not far away we have Indonesia. Well, it's pretty far away, but essentially this area is just a absolute paradise. This is probably some of the greatest land. And what can be revealed out here? What has been lost? What stories will they give us? Here we go. Here we go. So this is just waiting for a history, for a people, for development, and yet this is all the footprint, just as we see everywhere. Even out here in the middle of nowhere, we find these complex grid systems.
I mean, again, this is really tough to make heads or tails of. Again, it's as if the Earth has its own electricity and cities, so there was some kind of a knowledge of that in order to build cities a very particular way because of that.
And in this case, totally uninhabited. Here, this was a mega city at one point. Here we go. Laid out, engineered to perfection. And let me just show you again where we are in the middle of Indonesia. Let's zoom back in and drop a pin. I think I spelled Indonesia wrong, but who cares? Now let's look at some of the ruins and megaliths of Indonesia. Here, this is titled The Mysterious Ancient Pyramid. Okay. These really interesting characters all over. Here we can get a closer look. Here, more structures that resemble the clay pots I was just showing you in Laos, a place that was heavily bombed. So here again we have giant clay pots. These are clearly not berries, and very advanced out here in the jungle, and a lot.
Boggin in the chat saying if Anatoly Fomenko is correct, we've been lied to about the whole of history, basically, and I think he is, yeah. I went over Fomenko in the Altered History series, referenced him quite frequently.
Of sites like this, almost looks like basalt, but I think basalt is a condition, again, aftermath of a reset. And we're not going to spend all day, but I did think it was important to tie some of these puzzle pieces together, because it does all tie together. What is revealed in
Old Man Chiba has a point here. If we are told lies about what happened yesterday, I mean, or even today, I mean, you watch the mainstream news, how much of that is true? So why would, I mean, the further back you go, obviously, if we're going by that metric, the less likely it would to be true.
one little corner of the realm seems to be the case everywhere. I hope that my videos are upbeat. I try to be. I mean, there's so much in the world to bring you down, and I always try to look at the bright side of life. I think whoever discovered these ruins and removed the dirt from them was also looking at the bright side, not building a golf course on top of them, but revealing them for us to ponder and make sense of. And I like to continue their work, essentially trying to make sense of everything. I found this place a couple hours away from my house. I didn't quite make it out here, but I got pretty close. Maybe I approached the gate of the old city. Definitely on my bucket list. And this is kind of the gate here. Back here you can actually see the I-70, this line here. We see a truck or a van, and it cuts through the most amazing landscape, cooked out ruins in my opinion. And I think it ties in beautifully with this video. When you see the way that this road winds through these, what we would be told are sandstone formations, there's no way. Let me just show you a peek. So this is it. Cutting through this. No way. The cut was already here. And Chief and I were right at this rest area. Once you cross this rest area, you will not be able to turn around for 30 miles. Legally. The next turnaround point is right here. And that's exactly what we did.
And of course, I mean, I don't know if we're going to go into it here, but there's also the quarry theory, that the entire Earth was used as a quarry at some point.
We stopped here for a little bit. There's a nice view of this mountain. I believe it's called Temple Mountain. And this was another great rest area right here on top of this mesa with a view of all of this. I'll inject a picture if I can. I thought of camping there for the night, but ended up driving back to Green River here. So for today, I thank you for joining me. I love you all. God bless. And
See, we've got one more exhibit here. Or actually two more exhibits here, which we will take a look at, try to make a comprehensive, another John Levi video here, comprehensive, definitive overview of the Tartaria mudflood theory for newbies.
Blank mind? I know I can't say everything, but I know I must say something. Welcome. And when I first became aware of this subject, I found myself looking
say everything, but I know I must say something. Welcome. And when I first became aware of this subject, I found myself looking at ancient sites all over the world, and very often I wish I had lived anywhere else but America. And the more I continued to research this subject, it eventually became clear, and it was staring me right in the face, that the same architecture, built by the same displaced people, was found all over America. And in fact, this lent to the next part of the puzzle. If the history of America is so young as compared to the rest of the world, then this displacing of a prior civilization must have happened less than 200 years ago. And so we all began looking into our past for old construction photos and evidence to support the mainstream narrative. And what we have found is very little to support these claims, seeming pretty clear that there was a past civilization on this continent before our people arrive on the scene. And in fact, we see at least two eras. One that is badly damaged, it seems to have been hit with heat and water, and one that seems to be in pretty good shape. And when I say in pretty good shape, I mean the buildings, lending to the idea that the last reset was one of catastrophic consequences, removing the inhabitants of this prior civilization, but yet leaving these glorious buildings behind, perhaps the greatest proof lending to this theory. And of course, these being redesignated as hotels and libraries, post offices, capitol buildings, schools, and
they're so out of place. I mean, look how out of place this column is versus these other buildings around it.
many other designations. And oftentimes, people ask, what about the Native Americans? What do they have to say about this theory? Surely, they would have seen these ancient...
You know what else is kind of weird? Doesn't that look like a space shuttle? A space shuttle with a rocket? I mean, look at that. I'll put an image of just a random space shuttle rocket here. I mean, it would be from a slightly different angle, but yeah, interesting. Interesting. Interesting.
Cities would have lived amongst them, would have stories to tell. And in many cases, they do have these stories. Recently, I was told of a Navajo creation story, and of course, we have the Hopi creation story, telling us that we've done all of this at least 4 times over. Civilization has risen to great levels only to be reset by one catastrophe or another. And of course, many of the traditions and oral stories of the Native Americans have been buried through forced education programs, a great tragedy in our early history. And no matter where you go, even the most recent parts of the Americas, being Alaska, Hawaii, Nevada, the Old West, these exact same buildings can be found. And recently I was watching a video on the inception of Las Vegas, and even the story as they told it was supposed to be crude buildings and tents and makeshift hotels. And yet when you looked at the background in these pictures, you already had glorious buildings in the style of the old world with the quality and craftsmanship not expected of old cowboys. So here I just wanted to take a little tour of Capitol buildings of America. And Capitol buildings are a good example because oftentimes
Capital punishment. Capital of or pertaining to the head. Huh. Also, in the 1500s, capital crimes. Capital had a sense of deadly or mortal. So you have these city halls, hells, and capital buildings, capital deadly mortal. Head and life mortality existed in Old English. I'm going to etymol online here. Hafod guilt means deadly sin, capital offense. Haftes Polian, to forfeit life, capital punishment. To forfeit life. So are these the buildings that remain after the builders forfeited their lives, and that's why they are the Capitol buildings? Capitals? Some
of the most glorious buildings are designated as Capitol buildings, and typically always having this same style, with a dome in the center and a grand entryway. And so here we begin with Alabama, constructed in 1851. A true wonder. buildings.
Tiffany in the chat saying all roads lead to Rome. Interesting, but where was the true Rome? And was Rome some kind of worldwide civilization?
Seeming to serve another function, and we see many of them having 4 smaller domes surrounding the main dome, seeming to be a functional role, and perhaps very simply powering the building. Completed in 1915. And here the California State Capitol, completed in 1874. Arriving on horse to mine for gold, and within 25 years, inconceivable to consider these people building this. And here we have one of my favorites, a golden dome, absolutely amazing, overlooking the Rocky Mountains, the Eastern Gate, a true wonder. And this baby is located in Colorado, completed in 1894. And mind you, the population of all of these states at the time, so minuscule in comparison to present time, the means to construct are just not available yet.
And why would they even want to construct these incredible buildings for such small, tiny populations? I mean, just like, I know in Australia and South America, I mean, there's some places in the middle of the desert that have buildings like this. Like, what would be, like, it's just kind of weird.
The ability to do everything, even heating and cooling. Even in modern times, we see a window fan here. That's another issue. 1894, no cranes, maybe electricity. Just arriving on the scene, perhaps for 10 years. And why wouldn't people build something a little more practical, a little more suited for the times? It doesn't make sense to do the most difficult thing at the most difficult time. What is this, a glass ball on top? Absolutely mind-blowing. In the late 1800s, there's snow on the ground half of the year, and realistically, impossible. And this has nothing to do with hard work and the determination of people in that time period. Connecticut, 1879, just an absolute mind-blower, very castle-like and ridiculous.
1879.
Georgia, 1889, looks like a gold domer. Idaho, 1912. Idaho, most known for its potatoes, of course.
Yeah, a bunch of farmers just decided to construct this one day.
And this was the choice for a state capital in 1912. Illinois, 1888. Illinois, of course, having no shortage.
Groupthink Skeptic in the chat said, grit. With grit, you can do anything. Yeah, how could I have forgot about grit? Well, that solves that. I mean, there's that mystery. I mean, they had grit. I mean, obviously, the potato farmers had grit. We can't deny they had grit. So I guess that settles that. I mean, should we just cut this off right here?
Of glorious buildings, and unlike the amazing World's Fairs that they put out and eventually demolished the buildings, this beauty is absolutely permanent and essentially in the same style. 1888. And again in 1888, right next door, we have the Indiana State House Capitol. So at the very same time, in the same year, just due south of Illinois, Indiana is constructing a very similar work of wonder. And here is the Iowa State Capitol, one of my favorites, the only 5-domed capital in the nation. This dome made of gold and absolutely over the top for a state most known for their excellent corn. 1886. And here we have the Kansas State Capitol, and perhaps this is where the Wizard of Oz resides.
That's a pretty incredible building as well. Wow. Wow.
And Kentucky, 1910, appears to have a concrete dome.
Kentucky. What was going on in Kentucky way back then? I mean, did it really have that much of a population?
And in fact, the whole thing seems to be cast of concrete. Very beautiful. And Louisiana in 1932 at 350 feet.
Did you guys see that ad? The ad says a third planet. A little bit of synchronicity there.
This baby resembling the Nebraska Capitol building. And here in Maine,
A Netflix original series, Absurd Planet, while we're going over Tartaria mudflood.
in 1832, very early time period, very busy in Maine. 1797 in Maryland, rather modest, made of brick, but again a very
Yeah, that one's semi-believable here in Maryland because it's just brick.
early time period.
Well, actually, 1797. I don't know. 17. Yeah, for like the 1890s, it's believable.
Period. Less than 25 years after the inception of this nation.
Yeah. Yeah. For the 1890s, that's believable. For the 1790s, I don't know.
In Massachusetts in 1779. Again, our nation is created in 1776. This is 1779.
Wow. What kind of cranes were available in the 1700s? Like a little wooden crane? How did they get all that up there? How did they transport these big columns in the 1700s?
George Washington would have been around, probably visited this baby.
I mean, horse and buggy?
If we're to believe this silly story. And here we go. This would have been one of the first glorious buildings built in our fine nation. And a complete joke with the means.
I mean, weren't there mostly cabins around at that time?
Of the time. This is completely over the top.
Absurd.
People do not start out
That ad keeps popping up. Absurd Planet.
Nation in this fragile and early time period with buildings like this. 1879 Michigan. Very interesting. The narrow type dome. And not one or two or even 3 stories would suffice. But in 1879, they needed 4 stories. Plus all this on top. Minnesota, 1905, one of my favorite domes.
Groupthink Skeptic asks, is there any place left we can show up and get some Freemasonry? Perhaps Antarctica or the lands beyond?
And again, clearly a cast concrete. Mississippi, 1903. Missouri, 1918. And Montana, 1902. Montana, way up there.
What was going on in Montana in 1902 that they were constructing this? Wow.
1902 Montana, probably not much more than cowboys. And this is the capital of choice. And here the Nebraska state capital, sitting at 400 feet.
I mean, this almost looks like some kind of sci-fi alternate reality, doesn't it?
With what appears to be a copper dome. 1932. And Nevada in 1871. I was recently watching
in the Nevada desert in the 1800s. In the Old West Nevada, they're building this? What?
A video on Nevada and especially Las Vegas and how they had to set up tents as hotels and saloons. And yet in the background of the photos we could see beautiful buildings and block work that completely was contrary to the narrative that they were giving us. 1871, the Old West. New Hampshire, 1819, very early time period. A lot of gold, very intricate. And New Jersey in 1792, again.
What? 1700s? They're constructing this in the 1700s? What? With horse and buggy?
The Golden Domes.
How did they transport all of this?
Very weathered. 1792. And the New York State Capitol, 1899.
Yes, grit. I forgot about grit. Whenever we're at an impasse, logically, we could just invoke grit.
Really looking like a parliamentary building. I actually wasn't expecting this. Looking very royal.
Yeah, this is the palace right here.
And similar to all these Capitol buildings. Very un-American. And here we are in Oklahoma. A massive, what seems like a Native American statue on top. And again, seeming to be
Whoa! I mean, that is stunning.
cast.
And what's going on in Oklahoma? I mean, was that really that much of a population powerhouse?
Concrete. And here in Pennsylvania, in 1906, very impressive dome. Not sure what the covering is here.
Aaron's Energy 313 says, so pioneers are building plywood shacks, well, and log cabins. Meanwhile, at the state capitol. I mean, it is kind of silly. It's kind of silly when you really break it down.
Super impressive, and a first for me. I would love to get inside the top of one of these.
Lord Zed says, they say Abu Bakr, king of Mali, sent a fleet of ships to the Americas in the 1200s. Even if he did, and even if all this ornate design was, and huge pillars and columns were on the ship somehow, how did they transport any of it?
Have a look around. Pennsylvania. And here Rhode Island, completed in 1904. Again.
Whoa. That's big.
These time periods and dates, very busy, as if this is the beginning. Everyone just realized they needed to build capitals all at once, and all in the same style.
And where did they get the money, anyway? Like, where did they actually get the money? I mean, there's no income tax back then. I mean, they took out all these loans for the Revolutionary War, and after the Civil War, I mean, a lot of places were straight bankrupt. Like, where's the money coming from? I don't think has anybody actually followed the money in terms of construction cost, material cost here for any of this? Because where's it coming from?
And here we are in South Carolina, seeming to have a copper dome. Just a real work of art here.
I mean, none of this stuff can be cheap.
Unlike any others that we've seen. Completed in 1907. South Dakota, 1910. Again, a first. And
South Dakota? Is South Dakota really like this major destination where they need to build this stuff and they have the manpower to do it?
And again, seeming to be copper, completely mind-blowing. The intricacy, and just to set this baby on here at this great height, having it fit like a glove.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking up the South Dakota State Capitol building. It's in Pierre, South Dakota. So the population of Pierre... Wait, this doesn't make any sense. It was only even founded in 1880. And within a couple years, they construct from the founding. So from when the first couple people rolled up in horses and shacks and cabins, within a couple years, they construct this? How? The population in 2020 was only 14,000. So we're talking a couple people with a wagon. So even if they brought in more people, like what would necessitate the need for this kind of state capital? So this is crazy stuff. According to the Wikipedia census, in 1890, there were 3,235 people here in Pierre, South Dakota. There were actually less in 1900. There were 2,306. So people actually left since it was founded. So there are literally 2,000 people in the entire town. So who's building this? And of these 2,000 people, I mean, how many of them are out farming? How many of them are doctors? How many of them are school teachers busy with other stuff? Like, how many people were left to build this? Like 10 guys and a couple horses? Kill the Bank says, grit, damn it. I mean, yeah, I mean, 10 guys and 2 horses build this building in a couple of years? Why would a town with a population of 2,000 people need to build something like this? Like, let's say they could. Let's say they were rich and they had the money. I mean, what is the justification for a town of 2,000 people to build this? I mean, it's kind of weird. Does anybody find it kind of weird?
Perhaps cast in one piece off-site? Not sure. Absolutely impressive for any time period. And here in Tennessee, 1859.
Let me look up the population here in Tennessee. Built between 1845 and 1859, allegedly. 14 years. Let's see what the population here in Nashville was. So, Nashville, allegedly founded 1779. At least that allows for more than a couple years to build this stuff, unlike South Dakota. I mean, that was crazy. Okay, hold on. I found a photo here on Wikipedia. I have to share this. I have to share this. This is totally bonkers. So this is a photo. This is a photo 1865 from the Capitol building. So this is from the Capitol building. So you have this ornate Capitol building. And what else is in Nashville? These tiny little houses. So, and not even that many. I mean, this is Nashville, 1865. There's not that many people here. I mean, there's just a couple of clusters of houses and like a little dirt road. And then this Capitol building. And look at the statue work here, too. Astounding. And there's like there's a tent here. I mean, they got tents and little buildings here. And we can look at these little buildings in the background. I mean, these are non-remarkable buildings. I mean, it looks like, I can't tell, maybe a little bit of brick. And like little shanties in the background. Look at those little shanties in the background of Nashville. So it's some shanties, a dirt road, and then this building. I mean, this is almost comedy hour. I mean, is this just ludicrous? Is this absurdism? Some kind of satire absurdism? Revelation of the method? Combination Illuminati humiliation ritual? Is that what this is? Couple of shanties, a dirt road, and then this state cap. Oh, man. Oh, man. Wow. Wow. So let's look at the timeline of Nashville here. Also from the wiki, let's look at their population. So in the early 1800s, 1818, the population was 3,000 people. By 1830, it grew to 5,000. Okay, 1840, 6,000. So a little bit more. It's a couple thousand people. Interesting. Still not that big, though. I mean, this is some crazy stuff here. I mean, this is crazy.
It really doesn't matter if there's a 50, even 100-year gap in the construction of these buildings. When we're dealing with these buildings, they always have this flawless and exceptional quality of construction. Whereas nowadays you can tell the difference of construction from a 1950s home to a 1970s home.
I mean, they were shanties. A couple of tiny little brick buildings and mostly shanty. Groupthink Skeptic says, I think Genghis Khan-style Mongols built it all with advanced tech, and American Indians are the survivors of the advanced civilization. Jess says, I lived in South Dakota. It sucked. Nothing where I was except a Walmart and a college.
To a modern day home, whereas these buildings are timeless, no matter where in this realm they are found. And here in Texas, 1888.
What? What? That was not built in 1888.
And here in Texas, 1888.
That is massive. So it's in Austin, Texas. So, Austin, Texas. So it was settled in 1835. So from supposedly nothing at all, so again, shanties. So here's a diagram here from 1873. So from this layout of Austin, Texas, so what do we have here? There are some bigger buildings, but mostly small, tiny little buildings. And I can't tell what this is. Can't tell. That's pretty big. But within a couple years of this, they're building this. And also keep in mind, I mean, there's wars going through here. Like, where do they even have the time? Yeah, I don't know. In 1860, there were 3,494 people in Austin, Texas. By 1870, there were 4,000. By 1880, there were 11,000. So not tiny, but yeah, how did they build this in the 1800s?
Again,
With what?
a popular
With what?
year for
I mean, it was only settled, just a couple decades prior with zero technology. A couple people with a wagon putting up tents. just a couple decades before this was built.
Capital constructions all throughout this nation, and just an absolute beauty. Again, Texas, cowboys, ranching, 1888. Completely contrary to anything that we would imagine. And here my Utah capital, looking absolutely top-heavy, and in the past...
Yeah, I mean, that's gigantic as well. So this was... Construction started 1912, opened 1916. They built this in 4 years in Salt Lake City. So it was founded in 1857. So a couple Mormons with a wagon showed up, put up a couple of shanties. And just a couple decades later, they're building this. Not to mention it looks like there's a bunch of measles outbreaks. A lot of struggling here. A lot of struggling here. So I'm going to bring up an image of Salt Lake City. This is a photograph of Salt Lake in 1880. So they go from this in 1880, you know, some shanties, shanty-style homes, to this in 1912. What a difference 20, 30 years make. From shanties to that, and they constructed this entire state capitol building in 4 years. With what?
I've mentioned that just this dome and upper ornamentation could easily double the price of this building. And how could a government ever justify this to the people that they represent? But I suppose the excess of spending continues to this day. An easier part of the narrative to swallow. Built in 1916. In here, Vermont, 1859. Somewhat modest and top-heavy little capitol building. In Virginia, 1788. And the Washington state capitol. Real beauty, matching these flowering trees. And the West Virginia state capitol. Very ornate dome on this.
So a couple miners built this?
Capital, and really reminding me of a stupa in India. Kind of next level with this look. Almost having a religious, spiritual feel, unlike all the others. Very impressive. Completed in the late year of 1932. Should have a ton of pictures of the construction of this one. Wisconsin in 1917. Typically, we think of Wisconsin as fine cheesemakers and having a fine capitol building. And if you notice in all of these, if you've been peeking, the architectural style is always different, and yet the style of building is always the same. And here we're looking at Wyoming. Again, an absolute beauty for the cowboys of rugged Wyoming. Recently, we looked at a beautiful pyramid in Wyoming in a past video. And here the state capitol in the late 1800s. Remarkable. So I think I'll cut it there as far as capitals. Sorry if I missed your state.
And we have one final exhibit, Tartaria before the reset.
One of the most obvious pieces of evidence to me is whenever we go across the land and we see beautiful buildings like this, such as the state capitol in Iowa. This is the baseline building for my research on this channel, and the reason for that, it's a building that shouldn't exist there. I think of civilizations as running up a tower. You're always looking to get to the top of the tower as fast as you can, and you're expending a lot of energy to do so. But think of all the previous civilizations that have
So this is Lucius Aurelian again.
existed in our lands. I suspect there's 5 eras, but there could be many more. What happens when they reach the top of the tower? Are they able to stay at the top of the tower, or do they fall? Greetings. The 5 eras theory is one of the theories that I use to try to formulate and visualize how the lands could have looked in the past. We have no idea what the actual history is. Yes, we're given a historical account, but we have many inconsistencies in it and we see many contradictions. The portion of the 5 eras theory that I bring up here, though, is dividing it up into looking into how our civilization came to where it is. We start with the Golden Age. And the Golden Age consists of the first 3 eras. Now, there are many cultures that have a division of 5 eras that are across the land, and this is the reason why I picked 5 eras. I don't know. There could be many more, there could be many less. Many things were possible in the Golden Age. Human beings were much more advanced and much more developed spiritually, and they could achieve great architectural achievements. I also believe that in the 3rd era is where the star fort builders came from. We're now in our contemporary age, or what others might call the Iron Age, or we jokingly refer to as the Plastic Age. And we call it that because everything is very disposable. And it seems as though we can feel internally that this era that we live in now does not match what was in the past. Although we'll be ridiculed for this, even though there's a lot of evidence that suggests otherwise. Today we're going to be looking at the Tartarian Age, or the 4th era. Now, I call this the Tartarian Age, and there are many alternative researchers that are saying we shouldn't be using this term all the time. It's just a name that's associated with it, a worldwide civilization that existed before our own. But what did it really look like? Well, we have to go back and revisualize the other eras. The first era, the Golden Age, where pretty much anything was possible, where human beings lived exceptionally long lifetimes, and they had an infinite spiritual health. They understood themselves, they understood their environment, and they existed in a wonderful balance with it. Not the promises of balances, but true balances. And their architectural achievements were stunning. They could build buildings that reached to the very clouds, and who knows, perhaps the very nature of the land is very different than we can imagine. It's not just buildings, it could have been vast flora and fauna that existed. And there's a reason why they try to tie this in with explanations of things existing many millions of years ago. But who knows what the actual timeline is? Was this first era of the Golden Age 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, or 5,000 years ago? We don't really have any way to know. And the only remnants we see of this are in great rocks and in certain areas of the land where we have hints of once great buildings that existed in the very distant past. Or maybe it wasn't such a distant past after all, because the forces that destroyed these buildings and leveled the land are things that we cannot understand. But we can certainly speculate on them. The whole point behind the first era of the Golden Age is to understand that in the very beginning, we believe that human beings were exceptionally developed. Now, this theory could be completely wrong, but the evidence that backs it up is whenever you go across the land and you find evidence of melted buildings, vast structures that once covered the land. And on this channel, we explored the Castle Rock ruins in Wisconsin, and we saw that there were hints of vast structures that once existed there, that had to be larger than we could possibly imagine. We also see structures such as Devil's Tower. It may have once been a large tree, or it may have once been a large structure, or something else. In the second era, we postulate a civilization that existed, rising from the ashes of the first era. Now, others may call this the Silver Age, and we'll review what this really was when we look at the Greek theory of the 5 ages. However, the second era, this is where we suspect the pyramid builders really came from. And we think of the original pyramids, or the Great Pyramids on the Giza Plateau. They were simply smaller satellite pyramids. We have evidence of much larger pyramids that are built across the land. And in my theories on this channel, I believe that this came from a second era, or a civilization that was still in a golden age, but in a different portion of a golden age. They constructed pyramids because it was a geometrically sound structure, and it also showed their connection to the land. And we don't fully understand what kind of technology that was available both in the construction of these pyramids.
I bring something up on some of the older podcasts on different civilizations existing simultaneously and overlapping. Like, for example, in some of the rainforests, there are so-called primitive civilizations that are just, hunters and gatherers. And if you go there and you arrive there in a helicopter and show them a cell phone, they're going to think that's some kind of wizardry or sorcery or magic, because their level of attack is really low, yet there's many different types of civilizations existing simultaneously I suppose that would be that's probably how it always was.
And then how they factored into the overall society and the use of such technology. But we suspect that these buildings also developed the internal human being. They supported the spiritual health of the person and not just provided a structure for societal use. It's a very interesting balance to think of. A building that serves society, but at the same time serves the individual. It seems as though our modern buildings oftentimes deprive us of our spiritual health, and they're very, how shall we say, not even remotely aesthetically pleasing. They're just there to be there and serve a function. The third era, which is another era in the last era of the Golden Age that followed the pyramid builders. And this was an era where we believe that the civilization advanced to building the great star forts, where they could manipulate the land and the structures and integrate them accordingly. No one really knows what heights this civilization reached, but we can speculate that they had tremendous capabilities to build towers to the very sky. They also had the ability to form and shape the land in geometrical configurations that endure to this day. We can see the remnants of this civilization everywhere we look across the lands. There are star forts everywhere. There are also star forts that are integrated in the very land. We also have the theories about how the land is shaped in many places, where we see large sandbars that extend for many miles on the coasts in many lands across the realm. Now we look at our current era, the fifth era, the plastic age, and we see that none of what it is really compares to what we had in the past. We have tall towers of glass and steel, yet they give the impression of being very cheap and disposable. They also show us the fact that our civilization just seems to be something that's readily thrown away, and can be thrown away. We also have to remember that we have many, many images of destruction from films, television shows. But today we're going to look specifically at the fourth era, the Tartarian civilization, or the civilization that preceded ours. We want to get an idea of what heights they reached, what was the maximum extent of their capabilities. Because this is the civilization that we see the most defined and detailed remnants of, such as the Iowa State Capitol, the many...
Does anybody think it's kind of weird that more of Tartaria hasn't been shown in Hollyweird? Just revelation of the method?
other beautiful state capitol buildings, the Art Deco buildings, all these buildings that we look at and all these city explorations that we do, they reflect the remnants of the Fourth Era. Now, let's look at the Tartarian Fourth Era civilization. And remember, Tartaria is just a term that I assigned to it. The civilization could have been called something completely different. Here's a possible timeline. Break it down into 3 eras, if you will, or 3 portions, 3 phases. An inception and a rising phase, an ascendancy in the height of their civilization, and then a decline and a fall. How long were each of these phases of this Tartarian civilization? We just don't know. They could be 1,000 years. They could be 100 years. We seem to have a great obsession with 1,000 years, and it's probably because it's a nice round number. What did this really look like, though? The main component of this theory is we have to consider the society that existed in this worldwide civilization, their culture, their values, their capabilities, and then ultimately their vulnerabilities. How was it they fell? When they rose, it was clear that they had remnants of the previous era, the Third Era. But we suspect that the Third Era endured a great reset or some sort of cataclysm. Looking at what this civilization looked like during its height, we have to think on the integration potentially of pyramid buildings, great towers and domes that reach to the very sky. They had energy capabilities and the ability to generate energy, both from the atmosphere, and then we've also speculated that they had some sort of crystal power source. They may have had many other sources of energy that they were able to draw from, because it's energy that allowed them to build a great society and civilization. Yet at the same time, we speculate that they had a balance that they achieved between the society and the individual. Harvesting this energy may have well reflected that balance in the fact that they were able to understand the energy that they could harvest from both the land and the very air in the atmosphere, and at the same time the energy that existed beneath the land. It seems as though this gave them the capability, along with their developed cultural and societal understanding, to achieve great constructions beyond our wildest dreams. We only see the bare bones remnants of...
In the chat, people are bringing up orphans, orphan trains, incubator babies. Yeah, a lot of that stuff's really creepy. That definitely needs its own podcast. I went over a lot of the world fairs in an episode of the Altered History podcast series. Thanks, Bear.
Many of these wonderful structures. Think on the fact that we have diagrams and sketches that show us these incredible buildings at their very height. Yet we take this to even what many would consider a science fiction imaging or imagery of what the society may have looked like at their very height. They had airships, they had vast tall buildings across the land. They had cities that stretched for many, many miles, much larger than the cities that we see today. and their structures were built to be enduring, to last. And of course, you'll ask, well, exactly how did such a large signature of such a civilization fall? Why is it not with us? We don't understand the capabilities that were used to destroy it. We suspect that there was some sort of force or threat that arose in the land.
And I'm not sure if this was related to again, some people think it's just mythology. You have the Atlantean Lemurian Wars, and in the Mahabharata of ancient India, you have Vimanas and all this advanced tech, laser weaponry destroying the world. I mean, it's really tough to make heads or tails of this stuff, but it does seem to, it seems like there really could have been many different Armageddons and resets, as the Mayans say, just the world has began and ended many times.
That either defeated the civilization internally or externally. A lot of the hints that we have, though, indicate that it was defeated internally. Initially in the conflict, the civilization won in an external conflict. Now, what do we mean by an internal conflict?
Yeah, Sphinx Bear, if you go to playlists, there's an altered history playlist. Quite a few episodes there. Even went over an episode of whether or not they went back in time, got Jesus' blood off the cross, and cloned him.
This adversary found some sort of way to infiltrate the very beings of people and turn them against the civilization. We look at the great beauty at the very height, imagining a civilization that was in total balance. And it's not just the balance between society and the individual, it's also the understanding of the many cultural groups that no doubt existed in the civilization. They were able to exist in a harmonious nature. And we might reflect on the fact that it seems as though everything in our current civilization operates to turn us against each other through any visual difference or any sort of difference, be it a perceived economic, political, or whatever, to keep us at each other's throats. We look at some of the other possibilities of the previous civilization. Great airships with no limits in their traveling capacity. Great airships that could travel the land very quickly and efficiently. There's been a lot of speculation about airplanes recently, and perhaps the reality behind airplanes and jets is that they use some remnant of this technology, and that's why they appear to take off and land so slowly, almost as though they're hovering in a way and they don't operate in the manner that we're told. Yet we look at these great images of these airships and their vast hangars, and again we still see the remnants of this technology scattered across the land. This is what will be shown airship hangars looked like in the 1920s. The fact being, though, is that this did really exist. It causes us to question if the capacity behind this, though, is far greater than we're shown. That this is merely the bare bones remnants of it, the only portions of the technology that they could return to operational capacity. It's interesting to me that we even have accounts that question the existence and the veracity of these airships docking with tall buildings and tall structures. Some cities, such as Tulsa, even completely deny the account that an airship ever docked with any tall structure in the city. Yet there are other accounts within the history of aviation that shows that this is very true, and this was far more commonplace than they'd like us to think now. We consider the fact that there's been a very defined attack on airships. Now we visualize the decline of this previous civilization. If we suspect that they won a physical external war against...
I mean, I'll have to do a dedicated episode on the airships. But the airships are fascinating because some of these luxury airships, I mean, they had movie theaters and restaurants. I mean, it seems like a much better way to travel than in a cramped little aluminum airplane. I mean, has anybody ever seen the inside of some of these luxury airships? Let me see if I can bring up some images here. I was just looking at this maybe a couple weeks ago. Totally forgot where I saw it. See if I can find it here. Okay, here we go. Here's a schematic here. There was even a promenade where you can go walking, get exercise. I mean, how is this not a better form of travel than cramped airliners? I mean, look at this. There's a lounge, a promenade going all the way around. And there was even one with a movie theater. Let me see if I can find that one. This is the LZ-130 Zeppelin. I mean, just check this out. I mean, look at the size of this. You have lounges, smoking rooms, gigantic dining rooms like restaurants. I mean, just really incredible. Just looks like a really luxury mode of travel compared to today. Here's some photos of Zeppelins docking and people boarding them. I mean, you could see the people getting on there. Very, very interesting stuff. Very, very interesting stuff. I mean, and who knows how even more advanced they could have been the further you go back.
And some unknown enemy. We have to realize that the unknown enemy changed its tactics and infiltrated the civilization itself by corrupting human beings from the inside. As a result, they began to corrupt the very facets that kept the civilization propped up, considering the fact that the civilization was based on an effective government that actually worked in the interests of the people. That was probably one of the first things that changed. The government then became self-serving, or serving the purposes and intentions of the exterior force that infiltrated it. Therefore, they began to turn the civilization against one another, emphasizing every single physical, social, and economic difference, whether they were real or not. Even the perceived differences, the ideals, caused these people to begin to distrust one another, and gradually their civilization began to erode from the inside out. The great buildings were no longer maintained, the energy systems were neglected. People began to even question their once great purpose in life, and achieving the very pinnacle of human being. They began to turn away from that. And you can find evidence in that in every single account from every civilization and culture that exists on the land today, that people were corrupted. Eventually, it became a point to where the civilization could no longer defend itself from an external threat, and either using some natural cataclysm, or perhaps an unnatural cataclysm, an artificial attack using weapons beyond our greatest imagination, they were able to destroy and wreck many of the greatest structures of the civilization that preceded ours. And we have numerous stories of destruction of great edifices in the past, wondrous cities that were reduced to nothing, melted to ash and rubble, and we really don't see any remnants of it today. We think that perhaps the great fires that we read about that seem to dot every single city in the 19th century may have been the finalized destruction of the great structures that remained. We also consider the fact that we have many tales from both biblical and mainstream accounts of vast destruction in the past, even as recently as the 20th century, considering the Tunguska event in Siberia, and even the destruction of the Bronx, which occurred supposedly as late as the 1970s and the early 1980s. Yet the concept of fire from the sky is something that we have to take a lot more seriously. There had to be some great force that was employed, and that's how many of the greatest structures that once existed were utterly annihilated. And here's an image of what remains of the Castle Rock ruins, as I called it, in Wisconsin. Yet you can see it's the remnants of once great buildings. Now I suspect that this is from an earlier era.
Wait, are people saying that those are natural formations somehow? Just these random rock faces where you could see the lines in between the stones?
But this could be as recently as the last era, the Fourth Era, or the Tartarian civilization. We just don't know. So we have to operate on speculation and try to put the pieces.
Yeah, D-Town Books, ABQ, he did say the destruction of the Bronx. That's a fascinating topic. I'll have to do a dedicated episode on that. But apparently there were a lot of skyscrapers there, and then it just looked bombed out in the 60s and 70s, 1970s. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. We don't have time to get into that now, but yeah.
Together to put together the overall story of what really happened. And why do I suspect that these ruins are much older and are actually the ruins of these great buildings? Well, it's because of the fact that you can't really get an idea of the structures, but you still see signs of symmetry in these ruins. And these signs of symmetry and the vast magnitude that they reflected had to be the once great structures of the First Era. The structures that reached to the very clouds, the legends that we have of such edifices as the Tower of Babel.
I believe the Mayans say this is the 8th iteration of a civilization cycle. So that would mean that either we're the 8th or the 8th is starting if we were previously the 7th, but much more than 3 or 4.
Yet there are many other accounts that indicate that there were once very large structures that existed, again through societies and cultures across the land, and we'll be told it was merely the work of the gods. This is a idealized depiction of the Golden Age from the Greek account of the Golden Age, and they have a different breakdown of the 5 eras, or the 5 portions of civilization. The Golden Age, the human beings lived amongst the gods, they lived for hundreds of years.
Oh, no, D-Town Books, not unexplained mounds of rubble. The buildings were reduced to rubble. The previous buildings, possibly Tartarian, because the Bronx looks completely different, let's say 1950s to 1970s. Something weird happened in the Bronx. Yeah, no, we're not talking about some kind of ancient ruins in the Bronx.
And their spirits endured even after they died. They never grew old. Now, is that a reality, or is that just something that we're told to convince us to believe in it? It's ultimately up for you to decide. Of course, now we'll be told that a golden age can be reached again with our technology, and we've always been promised this great future. Although as time passes, we see that no great future is ever delivered to us. We can see that our society continues to grow more disposable. It continues to be something that just feels as though that the quality of service and the quality of life is decreasing. Of course, you'll be told that you're wrong and the quality of life is increasing. However, anybody who has any self-awareness and is capable of thinking for themselves can see that the quality of life is declining. It's not the Garden of Eden, it's not this idealized existence. That just seems to be a false promise that we're given in our current state of being. Did it exist in the past? Well, it must have, because we have accounts of it. And we are constantly detracted or deterred from even trying to visualize this. And we are not encouraged to think that this existed in the past. As though someone doesn't want us to even be able to visualize how great society can be. We have numerous depictions and allusions to things such as a fountain of youth. And why is that so alluring to us? Why is it we fear aging and death so much? Even in the Golden Age, death was a part of life. Apparently aging was not, according to the accounts that we have. Now, whether they're true or not is irrelevant. We still have this perception that the fear of life comes from the ultimate fear of death and the fear of aging. And you can see many examples of how both these fears are used time and time again. We also have accounts of great civilizations that may or may not have existed, such as the legendary kingdom of Prester John. We're told that this was merely a myth that motivated European explorers to go across the land and try to attempt to locate what they believed was an ally to Christendom in the distant past. Yet, looking at some of the accounts of Prester John, it almost feels as though we're given accounts of a remnant or an enclave, an organized enclave of the Tartarian civilization or the Fourth Era that somehow survived the reset and continued to exist, and may have existed much closer to the contemporary era than we like to think. Naturally, it was targeted and destroyed over time, and perhaps these are what the Great Campaigns or the Massive Reset War that we speculated occurred in the 19th century may have been all about destroying. These enclaves that existed across the land, and perhaps the enclave of Prester John, or whatever the real name was of the individual or society that existed there. Yet looking around, we still see many of the bare-bones remnants of the previous civilization, and it's everywhere. Such as here in New Orleans, where you'll see a lot of accounts and a lot of images that show that great advanced buildings existed there. Defenders of the mainstream account will tell us, well, it was simply part of the great French presence that existed in North America and that they forfeited it when they sold it as part of the Louisiana Purchase because of the Napoleonic Wars, which are a very questionable event in and of themselves. Yet we see many of these buildings, and while they may be smaller in scale, we suspect that these buildings are the remnants of the previous civilization, that they reflected their greatness. Now, this is a building that supposedly preceded the Art Deco era in Cleveland, and yet we see such beauty and amazing architectural achievement with it, with the pediment and the columns, and even the height and the beauty and the artistic desire of it. Perhaps this was just a small administrative building that existed in the previous civilization. Or the Marble Room, going back to Cleveland. A beautiful, amazing place to dine, which, again, displays the connection between a society and an individual. A place where you can go and interact with other individuals, and at the same time, feel your internal being strengthened just by being present in this room. And during the exploration of this particular room, I joked that even a McDonald's hamburger would taste like fine dining if you had...
Kill the Bank says, now that I'm thinking about it, these victors that wrote the history were not very good writers when you really look into it. Unless it's all by design as some kind of revelation of the method combined with Illuminati humiliation ritual laughing at the goofs that believe this narrative.
This kind of atmosphere and environment that you're eating it in. We also see the remaining state capitals. And we have no doubt that these are clearly the remaining buildings of the previous civilization. Perhaps they were low-level administration buildings, or they were regional administration buildings that survived whatever targeted effects of the last reset occurred, whether that was some sort of artificial weapon, a directed energy weapon, or some other power means that we don't understand. Perhaps the very technology of the previous civilization was subverted and used against it, which we speculated was cymatics. We see images of the current age, also called the Iron Age, or what we call the Plastic Age, which states that people are born with gray hair, that people age rapidly, and they live a very harsh lifestyle, and that the only people who aspire to greatness are the people who are the most proficient at lying. And we see a lot of truth in this. We see a lot of truth in this in our contemporary society, and also in the accounts that we have of the past, where a society or a civilization is subverted by its own ruthless desires. We also think of all the images that we have of utterly destroyed cities, which again reinforces the notion that the previous civilization was completely annihilated, that many of their great buildings were destroyed, and only certain buildings managed to survive this reset. Of course, this is from St. Louis, and we have a mainstream account that's utterly silly in my mind, that a steamboat or a paddle steamer started this fire because it crashed into other boats on the river, and then it crashed into buildings somehow and started a great conflagration. We also have the Chicago Fire, and we see immense images of apocalyptic destruction from the Chicago Fire. Somehow the city was quickly built in a short period of time. The Chicago Fire occurred in the 1870s, and then they quickly rebuilt it, to the point to where they were ready to have the greatest World's Fair of all time in the 1890s. Now, if you want to believe this mainstream account, that's entirely up to you, and maybe you think this is credible. Maybe you think these kind of amazing feats in logistics are possible because people worked hard, and if they didn't work hard, they starved and they died. Yet, I find this account very hard to believe. And I find it much more likely that these are images of the last phases of destruction of the previous civilization, where they were targeting any buildings that would be too difficult to explain, or buildings that they could not convincingly repurpose and put in a presupposed narrative. Now, yes, we say narrative, and that term gets a lot of derisive attitude towards it, and rightfully so. However, it is a narrative. It is an account that we're supposed to believe. And the whole point behind it is to cause us to not have any understanding of our true history, because if we don't know our true history, then we don't know our true identity. Our identity can be shaped to whatever power that truly rules the land wants our identity to be. We're simply nothing, we're creatures who have no greater spiritual health or existence, and we exist for their very pleasure, to be used and discarded as soon as we're done. And they'll openly admit this too in mainstream accounts. Yet we look back to the Golden Age, and we realize that there was something much greater. There are accounts that our civilization and our people and our identity was much greater in the distant past. That's the real purpose behind these explorations. It's a journey inward to rediscover the strength that lies within every human being. That's why my approach is not to tell you what to think. You have to decide for yourself what to think. You have to decide for yourself what to believe, who to listen to, and what's really true and real and what's not. And I'm not ever going to insult anyone by insulting what they believe, and if you believe the mainstream account is correct, well then go ahead. It's not going to bother me whatsoever. However, going back to the previous age, there's no doubt that it seemed to be a return to the glories of the distant past. At its very height, the Tartarian age did reach that, with a balance between society and the individual, with a true cultural understanding. Perhaps the story of the Tower of Babel is not so distant or legendary as we like to think. Perhaps it's not reflecting the differences in languages, but simply reflecting the differences in civilizations and cultures, as they've now been inherently divided and are encouraged to be divided by the current ruling powers of the lands. Because it's a lot easier to retain control when you keep people divided. You keep them unaware of what their past is. They live in a state of amnesia, or much worse, they live with a fabricated past. And that's the question people always ask. Why would anybody go to the trouble of doing this? Because you can achieve total control. Now, we haven't really explored who the enemy is, or who really caused all this, the previous fall of civilization and humanity. We're going to explore that in an upcoming video on this channel called The Ancient Enemy. There's going to be some theories.
So, yeah, and again, not just, trauma-based mind control really is the way to control the masses. So they never actually do wake up if they don't have that mental wherewithal. So, yeah, I mean, we went over quite a bit, so that's, I wanted to put something together that kind of encompassed the whole theory. Some kind of cataclysm, some kind of mud flood possibly, and just this architecture that does not match the chronological timelines. Obviously, plenty more to come, but I hope all the MINDSHOCK listeners out there found another edition interesting and informative. If you want to help support the channel, help logic and reason return to a world that is quickly going extinct, you could donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.